G'day team, thanks for joining us here for another episode of the Grey Man Podcast. I'm your host Harley Fox. Today on the show we've got Andy Fermo. Andy is a former Australian Special Forces soldier. Andy has 2 deployments to Afghanistan. The second one, unfortunately, is riddled with traumatic events, including surviving an IED blast and witnessing the death and severe injuries of some of his colleagues, which led to Andy's medical separation and later a diagnosis of PTSD. Since then, Andy's become a huge advocate for mental health and PTSD, co-founding a company called Invisible Injuries, a not-for-profit charity that focuses on holistic treatment of PTSD and peer support. Great story from Andy, awesome to talk to, and a really important story that I hope you guys enjoy listening to. Thanks for being here. This is the Grey Man Podcast. All right, Andy, thanks for being here, mate.
Thanks for having me on the show, Harley.
No worries. Nice to meet you. I think I've actually met you before at fucking some ESO function or something in Brisbane one time a few years back.
It might have been. Yeah, definitely might have been. Yeah.
Yeah. With the Invisible Injuries.
Yeah.
Nice. You still running that?
Yeah, absolutely, mate. Yeah, I would have only just like if we would have seen each other around the traps back then, that would have been when I would have only just started Invisible Injuries or still in the process of applying for charity status and not for profit and all that sort of stuff. So would have been 2021, 2019, around about that time. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Cool, man. What's going on? Fucking
mate. We've got a few things going on at the moment, so it's been quite a busy end or push towards the end of the year with the delivery of a lot of the programs from our Veterans Wellbeing Grant. So that's been really, really, really good. Like, it was the first year that we were finally awarded after so many heartbreaking applications, we finally got through and got one, and it's been really great for us to be able to have some growth with being able to deliver the courses that we said we have and some good learning points, and mainly is that our participants have really gotten a lot of benefit from what we're offering. So that's the main thing, man.
Yeah, beautiful. You're talking about applying for government grants and all that sort of stuff for funding.
Yeah. So as a ESO and registered charity, when there's certain grants that are done, we've applied for them, and then this was the first time. So Veterans Affairs has got like what they call the Veterans Wellbeing Grant, or a few different ones. Saluting their service is one for. So there's all sorts of grants depending on what your job is doing. Saluting their service is something that potentially that you could get for the podcast. If you're just doing like because it's getting veteran stories and saluting service. Best grants is another thing if you're doing advocacy and that sort of thing.
Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna look into that.
Yeah.
Nice.
It all helps, man. It all helps because like we were talking about, when you start doing these sorts of projects, a lot of the time when you first start, it's out of your pocket. Then after a while, you're going, well, like, this is all doing it, and I need to make it self-sustaining, especially if you're sort of always going around. So there's a few colleagues that I know in this space, and they like to travel to be face to face, and sometimes it entails going across the country or whatever, and it can add up pretty quickly as to what without a sponsor. So yeah, man.
Yeah, 100%, mate. It's like probably 15 grand I've put into the equipment and setup and merch and stuff so far, and then all the time that goes into it, it's a bloody full-time job, eh?
Oh, it is, man. And that's why, sort of when you find ways to be able to streamline what you're doing, especially in post, it makes it so much easier to be able to do.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Like you were saying, all those programs add up to hundreds of dollars a month if you get them all.
Yeah, that's right.
AI assistance and all that stuff.
Oh man, that's the kicker for all of them now. It's like, oh, look at the new AI for this. I go, well, I only need one AI to be able to use it, and then I'll just plug it into that. I don't need the add-on.
Yeah. Cool, man. Let's dig into your life.
Cool, mate.
Are you a Western Australia boy through and through, or you just moved over there?
No, I grew up here. So when we moved to Australia in 1983, we started off here because Dad was in the mining game. So as a kid, um, we moved to Perth, and then we lived in mining towns pretty much, sort of
Yeah.
between Australia, Western Australia and Northern Territory as a
Yeah.
kid, and then came back here in teenage years. Grew up in Perth, yeah, in the northern suburbs.
Yeah, right. Where'd you move from?
Well, we moved from here to Mount.
No,
We
you
moved a
said
few times over a few years with Mount Magnet. Oh, so
I went in 1983. Where did you come
oh
from?
yes, okay, no worries. We'd migrated from. We were living in Africa, or
Oh yeah.
in a country called Zambia in Africa for a
Yeah,
couple of
right.
years. But we originally sort of moved from the Philippines, so my parents are Filipino,
Ah,
and
yeah.
being in the mining game, Africa was one of those sort of staging countries to get sort of some ground time, and where families would then apply for different places. And
Yeah, okay.
we applied for the US, Canada, the UK, and Australia. And, they didn't want those illegal aliens in the US, so we sorry, I've just been waiting for a thing to be able to say that. No, we got the offer to come into Australia and Canada. So
Okay. You didn't like the
two
cold.
amazing countries, and so we chose Australia, which is the place to be.
More Filipino friendly with the lack of snow.
Yeah, I think so, mate. I think so. We grew up in the bush, so yeah. I didn't see snow till I was a bloody adult, but yeah.
Yeah, nice. What are they mining over in Zambia? Diamonds?
Yeah. So it was mainly gold. Um, a bit of gold, and that was sort of the thing. Underground mining, open cut mining. So there was just heaps going on at that point in
How old
time.
were you in 1983?
I think I was like five. Better put it five. So I'm
Mate,
78. I'm an old bastard now.
looking good, mate. Looking good.
Thanks.
Oh, what do they say there? Black don't crack, yellow don't crack either.
Oh, that's it, mate. That's why it's golden delicious, mate. The chicks are always,
Cool, man. So what did you guys grew up over in Perth there? You got siblings as well?
yeah. I come from a family of like three siblings, so from I suppose an Asian family around about that time. It was a small family, but three where I'm the oldest,
Yep.
and my sister's in the middle, and my brother's the youngest as well, and he actually ended up serving in the army as well.
Oh, yeah, cool. What was it like growing up in Australia as a young fella?
Mate, well, when we migrated here, it was still kind of like sort of a minority group or immigrant family,
Mm.
still sort of that tail end of the White Australia policy. It was in the 80s,
I was
and
going to say in
I
the
grew up.
80s it would have been a bit more racism fucking flying around.
Oh, it was, but we sort of didn't pick up on it as much until sort of I was a bit older. But it wasn't overly terrible. But I grew up in mining towns, so
Mm.
you kind of like there was a couple of other minorities at that time, and sort of we were amongst those smaller communities, let's say, where you've got the Asians, you've got the Europeans or your Italians a lot of the time, and then people from Southeast Asia, and obviously the indigenous community as well. So that we were growing up and there was a lot of communities out on the outskirts of those towns. Yeah, and then so that was an interesting thing to do. But I think from that it also bred resilience, being because I had to. Being the eldest in of our siblings and going to school, you kind of like had to uh, learn to sort of defend yourself quickly, or you'd be a bit of a pushover in that way. But
The
it
protector
wasn't
of your
like
siblings.
yeah. But my memory of it wasn't so that it was so overly terrible where I was bullied or anything like that. In those smaller towns, you have those elements of there. It's more along like the lines of the verbal. For me, it's along that lines of that sort of verbal abuse that you get, but at the same time, you know, I had a great childhood in the mines because you got to be able to make your own fun. Can you hear me, mate? Yeah.
So you're just saying, as a minority in a mining town.
Yeah, look, yeah, there was a minority group in the mining town, but for the most of it, the mining towns that we lived in were small communities. So I think anything that sort of is sort of that you sort of can consider as racism, or what I would like, you know, your bar or your tolerance to different things there, you know, you can tell when someone's really being overtly like in your face and really aggressive in that way, or it just might be in speaking, and you know, you only get that as older. So mine was more, it was more a verbal thing. But as a kid though, like, you know, we integrated with all the kids there. So you know, I grew up in Mount Magnet, a smaller town. Jabiru was another smaller town in the Northern Territory. Same with Tennant Creek at the time was gold mining town, and then Southern Cross from Marvel Lock back in WA. All those ones there, like Marvel Lock was a school that only had 30 kids. It was so good. It was so good. Like, you know, 30 kids and 2 teachers.
And you were 4 of them.
Yeah, you know, and so all the kids would come back to our place because mum used to make what we call, you know, in Tagalog, it's called merienda. It's a borrowed Spanish word which means afternoon snack. So all the kids would sort of come back to our place, and she'd always have food ready to go, and we'd play because, you know, there was so much place. Come back for some food, and then woof, we're out into the bush. And then playing in the tailings, which we should probably have been playing in the tailings. And if you're not familiar with that, sort of, it's like these ponds that they have to be able to put all the, you know, whatever waste water they have in it. So because they leave white crust and like cool colors, you're like, oh, let's play in this. Probably shouldn't be playing in that.
That's how you got your tail.
Yeah, exactly. I've got a. You know, I look googly eye and all this stuff. But you know, it was awesome because I think we got to. It was pretty much that sort of quintessential, whether we'd be playing sport or going out on our bikes, and then later on childhood on our motorbikes. We could go pretty much anywhere and do anything that we want as long as we had some fun, was safe, and would come back by dinner time type thing. So that was that type of growing up. Without so many rules, it was really carefree to be able to, you know, ride on the roads without worrying about a dickhead, a speeding and that sort of thing, you know. And a lot of the times you know, the tuck shop was the post office, was the bloody pub, and was the, you know, was the servo type of thing. You know, and the small Asian takeaway at the back. That's why I've got an affinity for those outback sort of Chinese you know, places, because, you know, that's the type of food that we also grew up on as well.
Nice. Cool. So did you, there was no inclination to follow in your dad's footsteps and get into the mining industry?
I think as a kid, you know, that was pretty cool. So there were sort of 2 phases to when we grew up. And this is a thing that sort of comes now, and one of the issues that really comes in. So as a kid growing up, following my dad's footsteps was one thing, you know, coming in. They came here to create opportunities for our family, and it was always good. Like they led by example, and they worked hard and did these things, you know. Like we came in, there was no immediate support to come here. You know, so following in Dad's footsteps was always a good thing. We were living the mines. I was living the adventure. You know, we had a pretty good life everywhere we moved back in the day. The mines used to provide pretty much, they'd build the town, or it'd be an existing town, and they'd provide the houses. So if you worked for the company, you'd get like the house and the car and all that. So that was really appealing to me as a kid. And also what the oldies sort of said was like, you know, look, if you're doing this, these are some of the perks of this type of industry. And it's like, well, that's pretty cool. Like, you know, the great Australian dream is to own a house and have your own car and do all that sort of thing. And back then, that was really cool. But I think the waypoint in in changing my mind towards that was when we moved back to Perth, and I was just about to go to high school. And that was sort of the advent and the start, like the early 90s was the start of FIFO, basically, Western Australia. There's a FIFO job for everything. But back then, the swings were quite brutal. So in a sense, as a sort of, young adolescent going into high school, I kind of lost my dad in many ways because he was always away. Right, very much like in that sort of military life, but like, he was always away. And I think what was one of those things was like, I was like, oh, Cole, I didn't really want that, but it wasn't one of those things that I thought about at the time. But it was normalized for me. So I'm like, okay, my dad's not here, we're doing these things. So when I actually chose my vocation, which ended up being in the military, those things, it was normal for me, to be that you would be away and then you'd come back for a short period of time.
Yeah, true. Did you have any jobs in between when you're in high school and stuff?
Mate, so look, because it was a real sort of difficult time in that sort of 90s, where also having women in the workforce was also a big one. So Mum was working her ass off, and then it was the sort of Keating era where the interest rates were like 17 and higher, like such big interest rates. So everyone was working their ass off, like, and money's relative at that time. So she was always away, and then Dad was away in the mines. And I only see it in hindsight how much sacrifice that is when you have to do what you have to do to keep a roof over someone's head and thing. But for me, we got a bit of the run of the house, and so we run amok quite a fair bit. Where we lived in the northern suburbs at the time, we still had that mindset of being able to go out into the bush. And luckily for us at that time, the Joondalup area was the end of the line, so there was a whole shitload of bush that we could go out. I still had my motorbike, and I'd run amok on the golf course. But even then, then growing up, like sort of integrating into WA, I think the big difference in the northern suburbs where we were again, and then being in that minority group was that the northern suburbs of Perth it's like Little Britain. So there's it's got the highest concentration, in my opinion, of UK expats. So then again, it was trying to understand that culture, and lots of people coming in from the UK at that time, and there was a lot of growth. So you're kind of finding your space in, still making friends and sort of learning, and that sort of those cultural differences as well. So you had the Aussie culture from, and from being in the outback, and then that culture, and then obviously learning our Aussie culture. There was, some good times and also some difficult times. But we got to do, with that, making your own fun and sort of going out, we did have, I was a bit of a rat bag for a while. And when I got out, high school wasn't, I wasn't academic, like, sort of like now, having more maturity, but there it was more about, the surf, the girls, the parties type thing in high school. So when I got out of high school, I really didn't, Andrew could be such a much better student if he had applied himself and hang around with the best crowd and probably didn't, go and sneak off and have drinks and, the weekend, all those sorts of things. And I was too busy having a good time.
With a box of goon.
Yeah, so look, I think it's all ATAR now, Harley. But they back in the TEE, I think there was like, I think it was like 500 points or whatever, and I scored 198.5 or whatever. So it was like a big fail. I couldn't get into shit, mate, to be honest. But I did get into something which I got into TAFE, and it's like the castle, Andy got into TAFE. It's the biggest tertiary education this ever family's had. No, actually, no. My oldies went to university and all that, but look, I got in somewhere. And so I did have some ground experience before I joined up. I did have a few other jobs, but it was more of those odds and ends. Like it was electronics engineering, which was something for me, has carried on. Like I've always had a big interest in music. So I did this, I got into this electronics engineering course. And I was like wanting to build big amps and big speakers and, you know, that sort of thing. To go with my amplifier, I was like playing in a band and that sort of thing. And then sort of discovered dance music where I could just crank the bass even louder. But I had a few jobs. So, you know, I was fixed medical equipment, mate, for a while. That was like my first sort of real proper job besides, you know, like when you're a teenager, Pizza Hut and you know, working at the kebab shop type thing. But that was like my first job. And it was interesting because I got to fix medical equipment that was going to the hospitals and, you know, doing these things. So endoscopes when they shove them into here and they put the cameras in and then fix all the gear. Like basically it's medical grade tradie equipment, you know, the big drills that they use for hips and everything pretty much is the same as like your Makita or your whatever's. But sometimes, you know, they'd break down and then I'd be the guy that was there to be fixing them. So I was kind of like this lab rat there fixing this stuff. So it did kind of work for me because I wanted to be outdoors. Hold on a sec. I'll wait. Okay, yeah. So it didn't work for me because I wanted to I like the outdoors. You know, one of the jobs that I had as a teenager growing up was working for my mate's dad, doing it was what was it? It was landscaping. So I was doing landscaping, you know, rolling out turf, and it was really, really physical, but I loved the outdoors. But then again, growing up in the mines, I loved the outdoors.
Cool, man. So, yeah, a couple of little jobs. Been doing some electrical stuff and that.
Yeah.
I was going to say, what was the first introduction to thinking about the military?
So when I was in high school, I actually, I love the outdoors. So I always wanted to sort of do something outdoorsy. And the school that I was at the time, they set up a cadet unit. So it was Army cadets units that was there. And I thought, well, I had another mate that had sort of started up at the same time. He was like, yeah, do this, man. It's really cool. We get to go to the camp and shoot guns. And I think that was the clincher for him at the time. And I'm like, you get to shoot guns? Oh yeah, you get to go. And so this was out at Bindoon where they run selection. And I was like, yeah, wow. Yeah, I'll have a go at that. And I really enjoyed it. So that was one of the first things, but that was like during high school. And I enjoyed learning about all those really cool things like fieldcraft, you know, even doing drill and being repetitive was that, you know, I wouldn't say it was fun, but it was something that like it gave you sort of some good grounding. And then what I liked as well was all those other little bits there, your field skills, you know, setting up your hoochies and those sorts of things and mucking around with kit, all the things that you sort of do. And then also navigation was a big one. I really loved the orienteering sort of piece there and that sort of sense of adventure when we got to go on those camps a couple of times, you know, once or twice a year. So that was the first thing. But then, you know, as I sort of progressed through my high school sort of stages, that went more by the wayside in favor of, you know, the girls surfing party. And so, and a fair bit of drinking as well that was going on at the time. And so, you know, then I was in the sort of the rebellious phase. And it wasn't until sort of I had a couple of jobs and I was kind of just sort of meandering really after high school for a bit, for lack of the better word. I think that was probably, I was meandering and sort of floating by and not really doing too much. Had a few jobs, like those jobs hadn't really worked out for me. So I was just working in one of the most popular pubs at the time, or sort of a pub / club in Perth called the Dina, and sort of having a real good time, probably partying too much. No, actually, not probably. I was. So basically, I was sort of going off the rails a bit. And, there was a bit of I call it a little bit of the intervention, so to speak, because my brother had joined, like sort of he'd sort of followed in my footsteps of doing cadets as well. So he did cadets. And then actually, when he'd sort of finished high school, he joined up with with the mech. So he was he joined what was it? I forget the name of the unit, but it was a mechanized unit that he'd done here, the 10th Light Horse, sorry, and and then joined up to be a signaller in the regular army. And then so all that time he was doing it kind of when I was like partying too much. And there was one time I remember when he'd sort of changed over to full time, he was like saying, "Oh, this is awesome, man," and sort of I wasn't in the best sort of spot, and sort of he flew back, and I'd sort of been thinking about it, and I was sort of the time when he's like, "Oh, you know, man, this is for you, if there's nothing really here for you of that intervention, you're doing all this sort of stuff, but, this is a good fresh start for you to maybe have a go at doing this again." So I'm like, "Oh, yeah, okay, cool. Well, I'll start doing some training and doing this." And that was a sort of thing there for me to sort of go in and sort of have a go at doing that again, because I really remembered fondly that time as a cadet. But which I was soon to find out, when I joined up and went through that whole process, that you do not talk about that you were in cadets.
Found that out the hard way.
I think there was a few cadet under officers that went from cadets and said, "Oh, you call me sir," and it's like, "No, mate, fuck off. You're in the real army now." So, but but I signed up and then sort of went through that process, and that was really exciting because for me there was those sort of times of, I suppose, going in and sort of my focus was not just meandering anymore. So that was that sort of first time again after that intervention, was to be able to sort of focus was on training and getting fit enough to be able to go in. So then, he told me about what I needed to do for the fitness test and all that. So basically, when you sort of look at the basic entry fitness test, you go, "Oh, geez, it is really basic, compared to actually when you're in and then later on in selection." Yeah. But for me, that was good. I was going to the gym again and doing some running. Yeah, it was good.
What'd you join as?
Yeah, so when I finally decided to join up, I actually thought, well, I wanted to join the infantry or any one of the ones where I was shooting guns or riding in the cool tanks or whatever. So basically an arms corps. And then sort of like my elders are like, "Oh, we're happy for you to join the army, but maybe you could get a trade or every job's a trade, but maybe you could do this." And I thought, well, look, if my brother went into SIGs, I like playing with radios anyway. So that was part of that, when I did electronics, communications was a big thing when we were doing it. So making radios or listening to CBs was something like that. So I'm like, okay, well, I might join up I was going to join up as a choco, basically. So I signed up actually as a choco. And it was spec comms, which is basically a chook, or like a signaler, right? A radio operator. And sorry, no, it wasn't a stop operator. That was my brother's job. So yes, spec comms. That came off the thing. But I signed up as a it was a geek. Sorry, so the geek, which I forget the actual technical name for it now. I signed up as a geek, and the reason why. My brother had signed up as spec comms. I didn't want to be under sort of that same thing, but within signals. But basically, what that gave me was it was like doing computer science but in the army. So I was like kind of getting the best of both worlds in terms of like, with the oldies, going, well, this is like, it's computers, it's IT. They're like, "Oh, it's IT." I'm like, okay, cool. I like to sort of that sort of Asian thing. People get into IT. Asians get into IT. I'm like, okay, well, I'll sign up as that. But then, as I was like at Kapuka, and then like I mentioned before, don't say anything about being a cadet. So that was one thing. But it was I really enjoyed my time at Kapuka, and it was it was decompressing and getting away, so to speak, from that environment where I love my mates and love the boys, but kind of we had this relationship where at that particular point in time, we were kind of self-destructive to each other, pushing each other to do like that peer thing. So it's like, okay, well, now you've got this fresh start, and I really enjoyed that the learning and the whole thing of breaking you down and turning you into a soldier, that was something for me that I enjoyed. And I joined up with, he's one of my best mates now. His name's Kano, and we joined up on the same day, and we went through the same platoon and did all the same stuff. And so I really enjoyed that. So I changed over jobs while I was at Kapuka. and so the clincher for that job was I remember telling the bombardier, our one of the secos that I had, bombardier, and then he was actually the cook, right? There was a guy that was a cook. He was like Casey Ryback. I later found out he was in the SAS. And our seco at the time, Corporal Brown, I spoke to them and I said, look, I'm looking to go full time. And they're like, all right, Fermo, what do you like doing? And I said, well, look, I joined up as this, but is there any roles within signals still that I could still shoot guns, go on the man packs and do the warfighting stuff? And they're like, well, actually there is. And, they went out to the thing and looked at the jobs that were available. And then they said, well, look, there's a couple of options, but the job that you're sort of describing, is EW. Have you heard of that? And I went, what's that? They said, well, electronic warfare. And I'm like, okay, tell me more. I'm curious. And they said, well, it's basically, sneaky peeky stuff. You get a top secret clearance and you get to do some stuff, and I'm like, really? Yeah. And you still get to shoot guns and do that thing, but you get to play, with the really sneaky peeky stuff. I said, well, what's that? I said, we can't tell you because we don't have the clearance for it. I'm like, well, top secret clearance, sign me up. And that was basically the impressionable early 20s person, that was still a kid, really. And that's what was the thing. I was top secret clearance and doing this. And then so that was I changed over to electronic warfare then. And, once I got to the unit, it was different. So that was when we was posted up to Kabbalah, which is near Toowoomba. In southeast Queensland, and so that was my sort of entry into SIGs, or the choice.
Was that did you transfer to full time EW or did you still chocks?
No, I transferred to full time while I was there. So one of the things for me is I was already away, so there wasn't any of these external factors, and for me, that was an empowering moment again to be able to go, hey, look, I don't need to feel like I'm under anyone else's roof. I'd sort of moved out and moved in and moved out and moved back in with the oldies before I joined. As I was sort of meandering, I'm like, well, I don't really need to consult anyone to be able to make my own destiny and decisions. And once I joined full time, I'm like, hey guys, I'm really enjoying this. I'm gonna go full time and see how this goes for me. And then that was sort of the next sort of, as a career, wanting to go in as a career soldier. That was the adventure, man. So I joined full time there. Yeah. They switched me over while I was,
Oh yeah, that's what I was going to say. Did they chuck you into a different platoon, into a full time platoon?
No. It was a full time platoon. So at the time, it wasn't just with CHOC. So we were in. They were trialing the 6 or the 8 week program at the time. You know how they chop and change at Kapuka. So we were in. It was Bravo Company. So 11 platoon Bravo Company. I was in, and we had probably 2/3 to 1/3. So 2/3 was full time. And then the other third was part time, but we all did that same amount of time going in. So for me, because a lot of the times is that you could sign up as a CHOC, but I signed up into SIGs. I'd still have to go to the School of SIGs. I didn't go to a particular unit in Perth and then parading there. I just signed up, and then so for me, instead of doing some basic training at the unit, they just shipped me out straight away to the School of SIGs after Kapuka. And then it was full time from there. And the process being in SIGs anyway is that you're already under a vetting process, which takes you to sort of secret level. With the EW role, you required a positive vet. So that was one of the things. And that took a long time at that stage. So having that background of going to the School of SIGs for the basic signalers course first before going up to Kabbalah, which was like another wing of the School of SIGs, was something there that they needed to do anyway because it took so long for those. And then obviously Timor at that time was going off, was pretty much in full swing. And then later on, so we had Timor, and then obviously you had the Twin Towers attack. When I was at the School of Signals, that I remember that day quite clearly.
Yeah, right. Fuck. So you're in school in 2001 when all the shit fucking cracked off.
Absolutely, and that was like the start of one of the busiest periods, if not the busiest periods in the Defence Forces. At that time of within the Defence Force, you had a few things going on, but I remember it clearly. I was sitting, I think it was like a Friday night or a Saturday, one of those, it was one of those nights where I was just, in the lines and just been to the gym or done something. And there wasn't that many people there. I think that a few people had sort of gone out. This particular night I wasn't going out. And I remember the fucking sergeant coming in here, oi, you cunts, fucking whack your webbing on, come down to the front gate. Sorry about the language, but that's kind of like what it was, stand to. And I'm like, oh, fuck, stand to. And it's kind of like, because I was really fresh. It was basically, I'd sort of gone a little bit lax, but from coming back from recruiting, but it was like, hallway 11, like this, and I was like, well, we were going lax. All the matters to stand to. It's like, yeah, okay, this sort of thing comes in, automatic robot soldier, put webbing on, going, well, what's going on here? And then so basically there was a handful of us at the front gate. And then he goes, look, we're at, safe base. Have I frozen up again, man?
No, you're good.
Okay. And he's like, oh, we're at safe base, bloody Alpha or whatever it was at the time, like the full noise safe base. And we were at the front and the TV was on. I said, what's going on here? And basically he said there's been a terrorist attack, or there's been an attack on the Twin Towers in the US. And I remember we were just watching the news going, oh my God, this is, that first, the second plane hadn't hit the building yet, but we're all sitting in there. The gates are locked, and then they're like, trying to suss out whether we would need to be doing patrols and everything like that. But we were just sitting there at the front guard hut going, what the hell is going on here? You kind of shit yourself a little bit because you didn't really know what was going on. You're still just really the basicest of the basic soldiers. And we hadn't even really commenced our initial signalist training. So basically this is like a, fresh out of the in-out on guard, know how to load up your bloody magazines type thing as the basic soldier. You haven't even started the trades yet. So that was exciting, but also a little bit scary at the time because we were like, oh shit, this has hit the fan. What is it that you're wanting us to do? Start patrolling around the perimeter or doing this? So that was really that sort of start time to say, yeah. Well, we kind of knew then that, the trip went around, okay, there was a lot of stuff going on. There was the Solomon Islands, there was Timor, and then there was the Twin Towers. We knew that there was something going to be coming up, and we didn't know at the time, but that was sort of happening as well. And Iraq hadn't kicked off yet. So we knew that in the pipeline, there was a lot of deployment opportunities. So it made us even more excited and more hungry to do these things. And that was, for us and the boys that I'd sort of signed up with and that were there. And my mate, one of those guys being Kano to sort of come in, it was really exciting for us at that time, early 20s, prospect of being deployed pretty quickly.
Would have made you take your training really seriously too, because you knew it was like for the big game.
It was like, well, how do we train up for this Guernsey? And a lot of the time is that, that people call SIGs pogues, but you actually have to carry quite a heavy load of stuff with all your gear. And so we, even though we would started our basic radio course, me and a couple of the boys were pretty much, we were going pack marching around the base, and then we'd started going out a little bit more to the Dandenong Mountains and doing some big ass pack marches there and doing the things. And this was in our own time, so because we wanted to make it, so then that way it's like, well, I don't we're not really the sort of the brown nosing types to try and get there, but it's like, let's just take some action here. And then with all the secos and everything like that, it's, oh, yeah, no, what are you doing? What are you boys doing this weekend? It's like, well, we might go out on one of the nights, but we're going to go out to the mountains first and do some pack marching. Why are you doing that in your own time? Oh, yeah, because we want to get to a unit that's going to deploy. All right, well, that's pretty cool. What are the units deploying there, And then so we'd gone out and seen, okay, well, who's in Timor and what signals units is doing that? Let's see if we could get there. But then again, with the EW trade, we fortunately in that sort of trade, they needed bears in many of the theaters of war. So the chance of being deployed was really high. And then so that competition then went on into trade school up at the School of SIGs, EW wing.
Yeah, nice. So where was your first posting to after that?
Was at 7 SIG. So the School of SIGs EW wing is up at Kabbalah, and that's also home to the to 7 Signals Regiment, which is the Army EW capability. And but the thing is, with electronic warfare and the School of SIGs, it was actually a tri-service environment, because you also have Navy and Air Force. So we were quite privileged to be able to be through that environment. At that point in time, it was more like, co-ed before going into a more of the warfighting roles and doing the school. But when I got posted to 7 SIG, one of the things that was really appealing to me at the time, again, was that sort of man pack role, sort of doing the hard grunt work and going in, just like when I started up and joined. So I was posted to, they wanted to have a capability that was more man pack again, because predominantly they'd been more vehicle orientated till that point. So they re-stood up a signals troop called 547 Signals Troop, and basically it followed on from the guys in Vietnam. They stood that up again, and it was a man pack role where they would go where the RRTs, or radio reconnaissance teams, small specialist teams, would then be embedded as detachments or attachments to other units. So that was the thing at the time, because we needed to have, we had Timor, we had the Solomons, we had potentially Iraq sort of starting up as well. They needed to have this capability that would go in. And at the time, it was really exciting because they started bringing in these other things. So we got to work with 2CAV as well, the mechanized roles, and seeing how we could be embedded. So we worked with those guys a lot, went up to Darwin quite a fair bit, went up to Townsville a fair bit to do those things. But one of the things that was really, really exciting for me at the time was this possibility of working with 3RAR, right? Was the infantry battalion that was the parachute qualified guys at the time. And I'm like, oh, parachute, yeah, jumping out of planes. So that was my thing, man. I couldn't get any more green, and Wary, that was the thing, man. Packs, planes, and all these things. And then so I remember that they said, boy, you blokes need to be, here's your warning order for doing your parachute course, start training up for that. And so we started doing the parachute course. We'd been down and got detached went down for one of the other exercises that 3RAR was doing. And because it had been so long between, Guernseys from sort of that Vietnam era, and then it was a lot of peacetime army for a while, and then you had all these things going on, what they wanted to do is they'd sort of lost touch with having specialist elements attached to things like the battalion or the mechanized, and how they could be employed and embedded in. So that was a really big, exciting thing. So we were part of that process. We got down to 3RAR. They're like, who the fuck are you guys? Oh, we're the EW element. Oh, you're the Chooks? No, we're the EW element. And so, and they're like, well, what are we going to do with you blokes? And then so basically we'd have to do a bit of a dog and pony show around what it is that we would be. And so for those guys in the audience there that don't know what EW is, Basically, it's an arm of signals that intercepts enemy communications, and then through the gisting finds out what's going on electronically on the battle space, and then we also have specialist equipment to be able to then triangulate the enemy, and this is in a warfighting sort of more that type of role. So a tactical role would work in small teams, and then with these small teams we'd triangulate, give the upper management or the boss, the commander on the ground, a tactical picture of what was happening electronically, and then they would make their decisions based to move the guys around based on that intelligence. So basically it was signals intelligence. And then what we would then do when we had the dog and pony shows was to be able to go in with the ISR elements, of say the battalion at the time. So the guys there, that it was basically the recon and snipers. They're going, oh, okay, well, you're small teams. These guys are the eyes and ears. You're doing your recon courses and all these things. So basically you need to be sneaky peeky. You need to have your stuff. So then that way we would gather intelligence. So basically then we would be embedded with some of the guys that were really revered amongst the battalions. Is okay, well, the recon and snipers, it's like, hold on a second, what are these bloody black hats, what are these bloody pogues signing on and doing stuff with the recon and snipers? I wanted to do my recon course, so there was a little bit of resentment from some of the companies at the time, because we'd be working with the ISR guys. And that was really cool. We'd get like some of the spots on the recon course, or the sniper course wasn't made available, but really those field skills, what they needed us to do was to be embedded in and really sort of be trusted within the battalion, or within the companies or the platoons to have good fieldcraft skills. So that was really exciting, because then they were flying us down there quite a lot. And then the culmination came down there where we were doing the para. So a lot of the guys at 7 SIG at the time, they didn't want to jump out of the planes. There was only the guys at 547 really that wanted to jump out of the planes and do all that stuff. And so we finally got down.
How do you jump with your? What about all your gear? Does that come just from the Loadmasters, or?
No. So basically, we went down to Nowra, and we did our course, and then you filled up with all the gear, and then you got to strap your pack on and everything. But with the bear gear, pretty much you've got to really relinquish all the stuff for living. So food, forget about it really. Basically, it's water, batteries, and your kit, and then your warfighting stuff. So basically, it'd be all in the kit. And I'm a smaller bloke, right? So I'm only like 5'6", right? So, and then there's some big dudes, and when you're jumping out of planes, I think there was a load. So any loadmasters out there, please, it's been quite a long time, but I think it was around about 125, 130 kilos that you could have jumping out. And so for me, that was, I was only like 65 kilos at the time, or 70 kilos, not even, right? Young 20s something that hadn't bulked out yet. We jump out of these planes, and for the taller blokes, they'd go, okay, well, let's strip you down to clean skin. But Fermo or some of the shorter guys, they'd shove your stuff in your pack. So basically I was carrying some of their shit, and I'd be literally rolling out of the plane as best as I can. They'd have to give me the loadmaster would have to give me a hell push, because they'd load me up to be the same weight, which didn't help when you're sort of coming down to the ground, right? At a hurtling speed, and you've got like this weight, this lead weight that sort of brings you up to take you down faster. So, but that was part of that was part of the fun of it, I guess. And I think that the clincher, Harley, was when we finished the para course and we got back to Sydney. And the boys were like, "Oi, nah, piss off those bloody slouch hats, fellas, come over here," type thing. So basically we had a small parade, and for those of us who passed the parachute course, we had a parade there, and then they said, like, whenever you boys are down here, bloody put the Jimmy badge onto. So we had a beret parade, which was the first beret parade that I'd had, and we got the maroon hats. Put the Jimmy badge on there, and they said, whenever you're down here, piss off the slouch hats. You have to wear them. that was really a cool thing, and a sign of acceptance from the battalion or the companies that we were attached to, that, you know, we had that skill to go in. So that was that sort of first thing, and started doing it. And then as some of those talisman sabers came along, we started doing some really cool stuff. Either we were jumping in with the Bunra shuffle, which, like, you know, 100 dudes in a plane, in there, and then, you know, it was really cool to sort of jump in to you know, into Tully, or to jump in up north on one of those big exercises, Talisman Sabre, and do our thing with the boys. Yeah, that was really cool. A really sort of cool time, sort of to be in there, where we were redeveloping capability and being able to be detached. So a lot of the time there were sort of deployments, or like small sort of trips for everyone to either be seconded to other units and other little bits and bobs being tri-service. But in terms of the war fighting, that was really cool to be going down there at that point in time, and sort of being detached to them, or going up and being attached to the mechanized infantry, 5-7, which was really cool, or going up to work with 2 Cav, you know. So it was really, really fun to be able to do that, because it was kind of like being deployed, but not, or preparing for it anyway.
Yeah. Got a plane going overhead. Yeah, no.
I think they're doing some war games at the moment here. There's been a few jets coming playing around here. That was
Yes. Get invited into the club and fucking hanging out with the infantry soldiers and stuff. That's awesome.
Yeah, that was really cool.
And did you end up deploying as EW?
I did. Yeah, no, we did. So like after that, sort of not with 7 Sig. So at that sort of time, I'd kind of, like, you know, sort of again, sort of was enjoying doing what we were doing again, and sort of, I think we got to our heads a little bit that we were doing all this really cool stuff. So I was, you know, the saying is that you trot on your dick a little bit, and I did a couple of the things there which kind of put me down the line, you know, from being really considered for going to these trips, and then this. So I missed out on a Solis and Timor. Probably just from some stuff on my own, which is really silly. Probably being too honest. Like, I could have covered it up, but being too honest with my indiscretions, and all sort of alcohol related, really.
Fucking hell.
We're pushing through. We're fighting for comms, Harley. That's what we call fighting for comms.
Yeah, I heard something about fucking too much partying and alcohol, and you got into some shenanigans.
So I kind of trod on my dick. Yeah, we're doing some shenanigans on the base and those sorts of things. So I kind of like went down to the bottom of the pile in terms of being considered to do some stuff, which it was kind of my own undoing, and probably being overly too honest about being a bit silly. When I could have really just covered it up, you know, sort of one of the things. Oh, you know, honesty's the best policy. You should really tell us about all this stuff, so then that way you could, you know, no one could subvert you. So that was always the big thing there.
Let's roll through. We'll push through it, man.
We'll push through and see what happens.
We'll push through.
If it turns out a fucking train wreck, we'll just have to organise. Yeah, organise it when either fix out the tech issues or fucking do an in-person one at some stage later on. Yeah, cool, man. That was the whole last few minutes was all choppy and I couldn't really hear what was going on. But
yeah, so you know, you asked me about the sort of first deployment.
Yeah.
The first deployment that I actually had.
Oh, that's what I couldn't hear was you talking about you. It was a train wreck because you were stepping on your dick because you were getting in trouble.
Yeah. So I kind of did, like, at 7 Sig, but basically, you know, at that time as well, they had an element in Perth, a Special Forces element, EW, in Perth with the SAS at that time, and they wanted to set up the capability, which was another exciting sort of time, in Sydney but they always said in Sydney that you were going to be posted. And being from Perth, I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to be posted back home to Perth. So I was really excited for like a couple of posting cycles. So for 2 years or something, I thought I was always going to be going back to Perth. And then all of a sudden, that year that I got posted in, no firms, you're actually going to Sydney. I'm like, Sydney. Then I was like, okay, well, that's further away. That's just as far away as where I am from my sort of family and friends in Perth. But anyway, I made the most of it. But the first deployment was actually one of the first gigs that 4RAR had with Tag East. So I posted in 2006, and within a couple of weeks, we were down in we were with 126 supporting Tag East on their first DCT, or domestic counterterrorism sort of gig, and that was the Commonwealth Games in Melbourne. So within a couple of weeks we were there. We did some workup training, and then boom, it was down there. And the beauty about that first deployment was it really opened my eyes up to what that sort of capability was. So again, I was like, really green in going to these to a combat unit. And I remember when the boys were doing full mission profiles, they would be flying in, and I was just mesmerized because I'd see, we'd be in the big hangars or the staging area beforehand, and they were setting up all the gear. And for one bloke, they had, three trunks each, and then they'd muck around with their gear and then get what they needed and then go on to this thing. So when we were out at the full mission profile doing our support there, and that training, and this is, the games had sort of just started, but it was training every day in case something happened. I'd see the Black Hawks come in, hover above the building, and then the ropes come out and the boys in black just jumping out. And I'm like, flashbangs, bang, 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 boom, boom, boom. And I'm like, this is, how do I get a bit of this action? So basically that was again, like, the shooting guns type thing, the really warfighting roles. And I'm like, how do I get part of that? And then I think I got back from I spoke to the EW liaison officer at the time, and he's like, yeah, firms, if you want to do that, you have to get qualified. I'm like, okay, well, how do I do that? He goes, I just go onto DRN and apply for your barrier testing, and then you'll go from there. And I'm like, okay. So I got back from our full mission profile to 2 or something in the morning, and then just hop on the computer and signed up, and as soon as I told the boys,
into 2 day.
Yeah. And as soon as I told the boys, hey guys, I've just signed up for the barrier testing. Oh, you want to do selection, do you, mate? I'm like, yeah, no, yeah, mate. Are you one of the new boys, like, the new capability? I said, yeah, we're one of the EW guys. Are like, oh yeah, wicked, and so that was one of the things that for me at the time. Can you hear that buzzing in the back?
Oh, it's not loud.
Yeah. So for me at the time, it was more about new capability. And earning the stripes with the boys as well. So it's like, okay, well, I need to sort of lead by example and have a crack at selection at least. Like any of the blokes that get posted into in our particular role, they can't just ride on the coattails of being posted to an SF unit. Oh, I'm SFO, that sort of thing. It was like, no, if you're going to get posted in, and that was in my mind at the moment, is we need to earn some street cred, and we need to know that, have these guys know that we mean business, and we're a capability that they need. So basically, I signed up, and then did selection from there, which was really exciting as well. So when you tell the boys, okay, you're doing this, and they go, okay, well, okay, that makes sense. You kind of run with the pack. So like, as much as there's the whole training packages out there now, and there's a couple of the boys doing lots of stuff with SF entries particular, this was like, the document that you downloaded and just followed that. But training with the boys, not looking for any sort of special treatment, but you kind of, because they're already at that fitness level there, and their mental health, their mental state is so much better, you got to kind of run with the pack and either sink or swim with the training, which put me in good stead anyway. To start off with a good training regime.
Yeah, nice. So you went into SF as an EW.
Yeah, I signed up as a SF as an EW, and at that time they had what they call Cat A and Cat B. So Cat A, you would sign up, and then if you get qualified, you would relinquish your trade and become a shooter essentially.
Yeah.
But with that, that was really appealing to me as well because I wanted to do the door kicking, or be part of that. That role really appealed to me. But at the same time, when I got posted into the unit, I also loved the electronic warfare job. Like, it was wicked. And I thought maybe I could get the best of both worlds here. I could play with the sneaky peeky stuff and really be part of the forefront of a capability that's being built up within this special forces unit.
Mm.
At the same time, though, as well, is that I need to create some street cred for our troop, and then get some belief in what we're doing. So I actually signed on and said, look, I want to retain my job, which is a Cat B. But at that point in time, they've changed the selection now where you do certain modules, which was kind of a follow-on from some of the black hats that were posted that weren't qualified and attached. But so with mine, I did the full entry test and then the selection as well, their Carter course.
Yeah.
And then got selected amongst with the boys. So that's what happened with us, and then retained my trade as a qualified signaller. So 126 unit is sort of unique in that way, is that it had both qualified and unqualified guys. There's certain roles within that within the unit that you could still be a black hat and do things. And then after a while, when Afghanistan or Iraq sort of finished and Afghanistan fully kicked off, you needed to have guys that had certain skill sets. So that's why they started some other specialist courses. But for me, Afghanistan was just about to kick off. So they'd had rotation 3 go in with big op Perth. And so that was a big one. But there was a little bit of a hiatus in between there. So I was doing I didn't finish the selection, and then they did, we were doing our Rio cycle. And then that was sort of that time when they started going, hey, look, Alpha Company, you're going over on rotation 4. Firms, you're going to be going over with them as the team leader, So, but going back to selection, getting that. So for me, we were part of like a small starting off troop, and I was the first bear to be qualified in sort of that modern day era as a commando. So I think I'm essentially the first commando qualified bear that there was. There'd been a couple of guys that had gotten qualified and become SAS operators, but they'd sort of changed over. I think there was one other guy as well that had sort of come in. So for us, it was quite a special time, and another achievement that I felt that I don't really get to talk about it much, Harley, but to be the first bear that was commando qualified was a big step. So that was the big next thing there for me when the guys were posting in. It's like, at least have a crack at doing this. And, when you're developing a capability, you want to trust is a big thing. So can I trust this to be able to be here with me, especially when they teach that through, your selection course and the Rio cycle. You need to have 100% trust in your oppo and the team that you're working with and in all the skills.
So you're even better than a regular 2-day operator. You got the double qualification.
Yeah, look, I'm just gonna, no, I don't want to be the tall poppy, mate. I'm cut down by. But mate, high speed, low drag is the way that we operated on, and I thought that I got the best of both worlds, man. Really, being qualified as a EW commando. So the beauty about it was that when the boys were doing their training, I could go in and bang in with them. If we didn't have in our own training cycle, we weren't as busy. But at the same time, then I could dip in and do all the sneaky peeky stuff, which also included going to, Sydney's not far from Canberra. So like then you'd go from just a tactical sort of point of view to a big strategic point of view, and we go down to Russell offices and do our thing there, and seeing how we could further that capability. So that was really exciting at the time, because there was Perth, and then there was Sydney, and then as you would have seen of over the last few years, and hopefully they've changed it, there was that big rivalry as well at that time, of Little Brother coming in and being to Commando being a special forces unit, and the guys over in the West didn't want to really have younger brother sort of starting to build themselves up. So they always tried to slap Little Brother down. I just think now 20 something years later now that younger brother now is, he's a grown man. Stands on his tone, but so that's the whole thing, is that hopefully that rivalry has sort of dulled somewhat, but I still think there has to be a friendly rivalry to be able to come in and do your thing. But the whole selection process, even the jobs within Special Operations Command now has changed with their combined selection, and then farming out different units.
Yeah. Tudo definitely fucking got street cred in the SF world, but I'm sure there's always going to be that rivalry.
Just as there is between. There always would be, but I think that's there was at some points there where it was a little bit, that rivalry became sort of toxic, which sort of was apparent when we went to Afghanistan.
Yeah, right.
Probably more in the sort of later stages. For me, it was I did 2 trips to Afghanistan. So one was 2007, it was pretty much straight after the Rio cycle, and then in 2009. So SOTG 4 was after that big hiatus of our elements being there, and then we went in with that, and I went as the team leader, and then in 2009 again as the team leader. But interestingly enough, when I got qualified, I was still only a Lance Jack. So, but because I knew the boys and had done selection as well with some of the guys, and the guys that had selected us, that were team leaders and that sort of thing, they're like, "Oh, Firms, you're going to be the team leader." And so there was the full track at the time. He wasn't really happy with that, because he was kind of to being the 2IC, but at the same time he got to be embedded within the within one of the platoons, which was then another sort of thing of the capability. But I suppose it was a little bit of a bruise on his ego to have Lance Jack be the But I think I earned it with with getting qualified and building that rapport with the boys. I think that really goes a long way to being able to do that. And we were both competent in our jobs as bears. So it's just coming in, well, who would you rather trust, as someone that's done all the training with you, or someone that you kind of gave him the Soldiers 5 to, here's how you shoot your weapon and how we do it. A couple of times at the range, bloody, hey, with me, with you, and you're going in to do all those roles. So that was one of the big things.
So how was that heading off on your first deployment?
Mate, it was exciting, man. After all those other little indiscretions, at sort of 7 SIG, sort of being sort of trusted to do this, and a couple of those other accomplishments. As soon as we got being a team leader, mate, you're going to go. I'm like, oh fuck, this shit's real now. This is real. It's going to happen, and so we started with our workup trainings. And, you have all these sort of questions that go over your head. And I think because we were coming in after a bit of a hiatus out of there, as a whole fresh thing. So basically we were instructed that we were going to be going over as a forward party. So there was a small element of us when we sent all the stuff over, all the gear and everything. We were there for a good few weeks before even the main body came in. And that was all the key heads, the team leaders, and all those little bits and pieces that needed to be there. We were all landed in TK. And I remember with that first time, we went out to Richmond, and we were walking in and onto the C-17 that was there. And, those things are huge. And I was just sort of mesmerized with all the stuff. But how much shit you could fit in one of those bloody things, so all the stuff that we had there, because it wasn't already in country. So I just remember, some of our of our SRVs being strapped down, and you know, the quad bikes and all those really cool things. All the initial pallets of stuff was in there, and then basically we had these sort of netting seats that you would have to sit on for the whole trip all the way to the GAN, stopping in Perth. So it was really pretty uncomfortable to go in, you know, sort of a couple of us sort of ended up just sitting inside the in the SRVs and putting the seat back and racking out there, you know, because they were so uncomfortable. But it was really cool. But I remember distinctly as sort of we stopped in Perth, and then we stopped in I forget the name. It was like somewhere out in the middle, some island somewhere for a little bit, and then into country. So basically, when we flew into country, for those loggies out there, look, you know, these details of the exact spaces there. So we stopped a couple of times, but I remember flying into country, Harley, and you could just see the big, you know, the big yamas or the big hills, the mountains, and then you could see TK, and then as the sort of planes banking over, you're like, oh shit, this is real. But you sort of, it's almost surreal because you're seeing the snow caps on the top, right? The tops of the mountains, and you're coming into sort of TK, and then as soon as we'd landed, like, okay, this is for real. And I remember as the back ramp went up, all we were was just blasted with this hot air. It was like fucking 30, 38 degrees. Oh, you know, and so it was like, this is real, you know, but when you sort of have it pent up over your head, how's it going to be? We're going to be shot at, we're going to be coming off under live fire type thing. None of that happened. It was almost like a false sense of security. So basically we rocked up, and then we were greeted, and then sort of we had to start doing the unloaded thing. And that was what one of the, after we got sort of given our familiarization brief, I think the sergeant at the time that was sort of, he was showing us around, said, boys, don't let this tranquility here, you know, lull you into a false sense of security, because you got a lot of work to do. So over that time, you know, sort of we started getting to work and doing all those things. And then, you know, the first thing I remember was like, you know, there's some mortar rockets coming over, and then there was the alarm, and then you have to stand to, and all that sort of stuff. But then after a while, it's like, okay, cool. Well, you get used to that. There's that sort of uncertainty of whether something's going to come into base. But in the end, it was like, okay, now we'll get some other blokes in on those pickets. We'll get some of the guys that are here. And then so they'll man those bits where you guys can just, you know, concentrate on prepping up all your warfighting gear. And that's what we did. So we prepped up the huts, prepped up the whole camp, and then started prepping all the vehicles and everything like that. So it was really, really fun to be able to start to do it. And in Australia, one of the things is, even though at that point in time, you know, it was like there was real strict rules about how we go about things. When we were in country, the rules laxed a little bit because you were just there and you got to be able to do your own stuff. So that was really not laxed in the way that people knew that they said, if you're tasked with something, go and do it. We didn't need to micromanage you in doing it. It's like, once the job's done, let's go and test it out, which was a really cool way to be able to do things. And that sort of entry into and trust that they have over their soldiers once you're in the command. It's like, okay, we've trained you to be able to do this now. You do done the training, now go and do what you need to do. So if you tell me it's good to go, I expect it's good to go. And that's something that's really carried with me since. Yeah,
nice. Was there so much you can talk about from that sort of stuff being top secret, or it's all pretty hush-hush?
Well, no, there's lots of stuff. There was lots of other little events that I'm happy to talk about, man. Like, you know, there were some really good experiences over there. It was an amazing experience there. You know, both trips were different in their own way. So what did you want to cover off on any particular like jobs, or what was life like, or, you know?
Yeah, so after you set up TK, did you head fucking in country into the inner bases and stuff and set up FOBs? And
yeah, absolutely. So, you know, for the first trip, because we were away for a while, those FOBs weren't really set up. They were kind of all sort of unmanned, really. And sort of being in the Uruzgan province, basically as soon as the main body came out and flew out, we had everything prepped. So as soon as they came out, it was pretty much setting up for our first, what they call it, the baby operation, or just the sort of feeler operation where you go out for a few days, maybe 10 days or something like that, and you sort of do a bit of a shakeout like you would, which later became sort of Coltana, in South Australia for some of the workup trainings. But in country there, every sort of rotation you do like your baby patrol, and primarily then we were all vehicle mounted. Oh, yeah. So, before the helos came, especially on that first trip, so we went out for the first 10 days and went through TK and then did our little shakeout around the area. And that was kind of like hey, we're here now. So basically on the ICOM chatter, because I had an interpreter and so did my guys as well. But on the ICOM chatter, okay, well, the bearded devil men were back is basically what the said. So when after that sort of first trip, they knew that there was a force in there again that was a force that was postured to fight, and we were going in a big footprint, like lots of smaller vehicles. But it was impressive to see how many vehicles we'd have, and then also the other supporting vehicles, and fully tooled up, double front line. A lot of gear. So we had so much gear that you could poke a stick at. Like, the guys at the regular infantry battalions were going, what the fuck was, we had so much stuff, and it was at the disposal. So whether you were qualified or not, everything at that time for you to be able to job was, as much as they could, was really provided for you. And so that was a really, really good thing. And I suppose once we went outside the wire for both trips, we were outside the wire hardly for the majority of the time. Yeah. So we didn't spend much time within, in base at all. And then so we would be going out to these points then, which that later on as the regular battalions would come in and sort of fortify, Camp Russell was where the SF guys were, but within Camp Holland and the Australian contingent, then they started farming the guys out a little bit more. But with our first trip in particular, it was more about creating the safe spaces again in the zones. Then they would be able to go out. So really we were there to do our job, and also like to pick a fight and make that area safe. So then that way we could get our forward troops in and then man those forward operating bases. So that's what a lot of the time was what was happening on that first trip, as well as still really sounding out our role within for the next 20 years, basically, Yeah.
What was the first hairy sort of incident that made you realize everything was fucking real?
Oh man. I think one of the first incidents, as I remember, was we were way sort of like past the Chora Valley. It was a spot that last time in Perth, from when our predecessors were there was some really big serious fighting, and as we rolled up to the area of operations, I remember that there was quite a lot of like indiscriminate sort of mortar fire. So like those guys, pretty much could just do whatever their hands, like the little hand mortars that they'd have. And I remember there was one time when a whole bunch of mortars was kind of landing around us, but they weren't bedded in. They didn't really know how to. The enemy at the time didn't know how to, really adjust for their shots. And because like it was all different munitions and they were just chopping and changing, it was kind of almost like made it worse in a sense, because you didn't know where the rounds were going to land. If they were off, that they could probably walk the rounds on a little bit more, but you just kind of couldn't tell. So whenever you hear it, and I remember one time I'd be looking at his name was Rufus. We were just sitting in the vehicle one time. He's doof doof, and then we both had these like lead plate eyes going on, because a couple of rounds had just gone off. Mortar rounds had gone off just nearby, and you can't do anything about it. So like we're looking at it, and he goes, starts to fucking laugh at me, and he lights up a smoke, and I'm like, it was like humor, and you're like, well, he goes, mate, if we're going to die, we're going to die. Yeah, you're right. And so like from that pucker moment of going, okay, I don't know what's going to happen to me, having that black humor was one of the things there. It's like, well, I can't control where that thing's going to land. But I can control how I'm sort of going to deal with it at the time. And the way that we did deal with it was have a bit of a laugh and a smoke about it. It's kind of like, in Braveheart where old mate says, "Oh, hit your head with a rock." He goes, "I'm not going to move," and he doesn't move. It goes past him. It's like kind of like that, I'm like, well, I'm not going to move. We're here doing our thing, and if the round hits us, then we can't control where it's going to be. So that was a bit of a hairy moment that sort of told me afterwards when I got to think about it. I'm like, oh shit, we can actually be, hit with mortar rounds here, or oh shit,
luck.
we're going into this Khyber Pass, and there's lots of unmarked landmines in here from previous reporting. Like, where are we again? Hold on a sec, boss. Are we really going through here where, previously this was like mined the shit out of? It's like, yep, we're going through here. And you sort of have these things going, well, I've heard all these things on 60 Minutes or whatever other shows there are. Kids having their bloody legs blown, the civilian population legs blown off and all these things because they don't know where the mines are. So you're like, okay, cool here. And you forget almost, like, you might be in a harbour position at night. It's like, wait, man, we haven't cleared out there, so maybe you could just draw that sort of line out to go for shit. You're walking pretty much in front of the guy that's got the gun, and you go to dig your shit pit, and all those little things. You go, well, I could step on something here. You don't think of it at the time, but that inherent perceived danger that could be there. Is one thing, that sort of life in the harbour. But really where it sort of came to was once we were sort of starting to get into the outer limits of our area of operations at that time. So on that first tour, we hadn't been invited to go out of area operations yet, which came later on, and that sort of started on our second tour. But that first tour...
Yeah. Before you crack on with that story, I was going to ask, did you have an engineering element to fucking help with detecting mines, or are you just fucking winging it?
We did. We did have the engineering element. Absolutely, mate.
Yeah.
We did have an engineering element that was there to help with the mines, and that was probably the job that I least envied the most. Those guys, they worked tirelessly, man. I have the utmost respect for the job that the engineers did.
Yeah.
The minesweepers and even the guys with the dogs, so much respect for the work that they did, which was, I think, often overlooked for some of the other accolades that occurred overseas. But they were especially in those years where vehicle mounted ops, and we would be going in and with the IEDs and everything. As we were rolling with the element, those guys were on foot, and they'd often finish bug-eyed and doing so much work. Like I said, that did an absolute amazing job, and
man,
and was a capability that we did not we couldn't do without, basically.
I've had a couple of engineers on the pod, and listening to their fucking stories is like, man, that's like they were fucking in it. Like, probably one of the hardest jobs in Afghan, if not the hardest.
Yeah. Oh, mate, without a doubt, because I think in that particular role, they just had to be on all the time. Like, in terms of, like, if you go on and you're doing your mine sweeping, you have to just be on all that time. And then if you're only a finite resource, you were back to backing basically with the guy that you were with. So there really wasn't much rest for them at all whilst we were outside the wire. And if you talk about the majority of the time that we're outside the wire, you can see why, all those things in later life could possibly affect you, because there was a lot of stuff going on.
100%. I was actually saying to a mate fucking this morning at the gym how the Bushmasters, mate, don't get enough fucking credit for their durability. They must have saved so many soldiers' lives, eh?
Oh, we could get to that when I tell you about that little thing with our vehicle, but I think just let me to finish this bit from that sort of first trip. So two main things, right? So that thing, it was just really being able to bed down and learn. But I think one of the things that was really that sort of warfighting role in terms of like our like an attack, right? So front on attack type thing, is when we were patrolling through and one of my 2IC was like, oh yeah, look, I've got a little bit of an injury or this and that. So I'm like, I'm happy to sort of go in and bang in on the job with you. And there was some stuff there that we needed to explore. So I'm like, okay, I'll bang in on that job with the boys. And it happened to be one of the real sort of first sort of going through the green belt or a village, and we did like an extended line fucking attack through. So basically there was no one in there. All the women and children had gone. And for this one particular clearance, because there was some suspected, you know, more of a low value target or suspected cache of weapons and drugs and all those sort of things. And anyway, we were going through the village, and then it was contact. And as we'd been trained, it was like the full, but with the, you know, all of us being tooled up, a full frontal assault in an extended line through the whole fucking village. So basically, it was a prolonged, extended line assault through the village. Where we got some combatants as well. So some of the enemy, we neutralized those threats there, and we were doing exactly what we'd been trained to be able to do.
Yeah,
on the job.
Or just kick in like fucking.
Yeah. So that first time you really hurt, you're on the ground when you hear the whip crack just go past your head, is really real. I get goosebumps thinking about it right now. But like, you know, the adrenaline's there, but your training really kicks in because you train. You know, you can trust your oppo. You're doing your thing. You're going in your teams and pushing through. So that was like a lot of that war fighting that really, the bread and butter from all, you know, of your section attack type thing was like, it went down like it was amazing to be part of it. And then for me, when you're sort of going in through, you're fighting through, old mate's dead, but you got to keep going on and you do your reorg and everything. That really was that sort of first moment. Okay, I'd been shot at and it was really close. I got to discharge my weapon at close distances here, to either provide covering fire or shooting directly at the, you know, sort of at enemy targets type thing when you're going through. And so that was really, I'm in a warfighting zone. This is what we'd signed up for the Guernsey to be able to do. This was all that training sort of come in. Yeah. And from all sort of aspects on it at that particular point in time, you know, sort of because there'd been so much hype in going over, being that first force there, it on the whole scheme of things after all the other subsequent trips, it could be seen more of as a tamer one. But, you know, when you're first there, the enemy's also gauging what you've got capability for as well, and then they adapt. So then, you know, it was chalk and cheese, the space, the operating environment had changed from SOTG4 to 9, so 5 rotations later, which is really only 18 months in the whole scheme of things in the special operations world, or however long it was. It was really one of those things where that type of warfighting at that time, I'm like, hey, yeah, cool, we're here now, and then it had changed again in the second tour. So, you know, some sort of highlights there. I think one of the things as well, man, was that trust that the guys, that the commanders had in their soldiers, and building that they knew that they were doing. But the commander, our OC at the time, he was Major Ian Langford, Oxford. He went on to be a brigadier within Special Operations Command and had an amazing career. But just when he was our OC, someone that could just be, he was always one of the fittest guys, led by example, spoke to you like you were the only person in the room. So he didn't talk up to you or down to you type thing. He just made you feel like, you know, you had his attention when he was talking to you, and he could really communicate very well. And when he would give an orders group, he'd just be on his phone, on the radio, bloop, bloop, you know, when we were in spread out over certain bits, and he'd give the orders group with such this calm demeanor. You'd follow the guy anywhere, you know. And so that was that thing for me, the leadership that I kind of grew to expect within that Special Operations Command, because it was like he was just an amazing leader that you would follow anywhere, and he was kind of like, so everyone really respected him. So that was the first thing, and then the second one was like going, well, you know, we were expected to we'd have our orders group, and then you just go and carry out your task, which was really good, autonomously as much as needed to be. And then when you needed to report, you needed to report. So then that way it's like, are you good to go? Yeah, I'm good to go. Okay, what do you got for me? And then here's our intelligence package that we've got for you. And that was really good that they trusted our capability to be able to go in. So we would work with the ISR elements and then really start to do in. So that was a big sort of highlight really from that first trip.
Yeah, nice. Let me ask you a question on the mental state of that sort of stuff. Once you've gone through a big contact like that, after all the dust settles and you're sitting there having a brew or whatever, or setting up your fucking harbour for a sleep, what's the sort of vibe like? Is like after you've just been in a massive contact, is it like fucking excitement, like fucking yeah, boys, we just did that, or is it more like somber, like holy fuck, we just nearly died?
Yeah, look, I think a bit of a mixture of both. For me personally, like when you're going through, I didn't think about those things there. Like basically, you're firing and moving, like you go in and then you do your reorg. So basically, you're still doing, when you do all your reorg and you're still in the village, the job isn't finished yet. So really, where the job was done, you do all your post stuff within that reorg. Once you get back to the vehicle harbour is where you kind of start to be able to do what you just mentioned there. A lot of the high fires, being able to go in because you can actually, you've got security around you in this vehicle harbour, and then you can actually sort of really break a lot of the stuff down. Who was going in? Like obviously there's those initial bits there. Who got, who eliminated that threat? Let me say it in a politically correct way. Who eliminated that threat? We were all pointing at old mate there, so I don't know. Yeah, it was me. It was no. Did you see it through the target? You never know, because obviously you're actually in the bushes unless he's the point blank in front of you. You can see the pink mist. It's a little bit harder to see. Like you go in. Okay, well, did I got them all? Right. So then it sort of becomes that inter-team sort of rivalry where it's like, oh, I was here and that, you did this and did that. Nah, mate, you were just back there, mate, cockeye this and that, you couldn't shoot. So
you could be the bad dog.
But it was really cool. So like you have these initial bits from that particular one. And for me, I'm like, okay, because there's a lot of adrenaline. I'm like, okay, when you're starting to be in that reorg phase and everything's starting to wear down and you're doing your things, I'm shaking from all this adrenaline, but like I still had to, okay, I'm here now. We're propped down. So then it'd be, okay, firms, go and set up your bloody EW kit, see what's going on. So then the next task would be to be able to do what you needed to do. So even once the assault had finished, you still had work to do. So, and in mind, was okay, well, let's see if there's anyone else left in the battle space talking to try and reorganize their forces and attack us and contact us from another spot. So then again, that sort of heightened level of awareness comes in. And it wasn't until we got to back to the harbour where it's like, oh, man, yeah, fuck, there was a lot of guys here. We were providing, you hear the other elements of the story. Yeah, we were providing enfilade fire from these guys to suppress them down. Then the whole story comes in when you do all the post-activity reporting to hire. And that was one of the tasks that I did, is match all the stuff in from our guys and come in.
Yeah, right.
And so a little bit of trepidation, but also like, high fives was a big one. But also at the same time, you can't dwell on it too much about the inherent danger you're in, but really you're thinking more about, your mates, your guys next to you, your team, and was anyone injured in the patrol? So, those things also come to mind when you're doing it. But also, man, at the same time, it's like, yeah, no, we got to do this, we got to do this assault through this village, and there was a few of us that had been through the same Rio cycle, and to sort of get that from going from we're training, we're doing all these maneuvers, and assaults, and then now we're doing it for real in the Guernsey in a short period of time. I think that was a real special thing at that particular point in time, coming from a non-war fighting, like a more of a peacetime army to the war fighting, was really special to be able to be part of that.
Yeah, nice. I think that's a lot of the problem with soldiers today, is that they do, years and years and years of training and fucking sucking eggs outfield and doing all the drills and fucking becoming proficient, but never actually getting to play a game, like to go to use their skills, like, it's like training for basketball every day of your life, but never actually playing against anyone.
100%. And that could play on your mental state as well. When you've always got this sort of heightened readiness, or you're always working towards a height of readiness, but never get that Guernsey to be able to go out. With us, at that particular point in time, that mental state was, we finally, we've done all this training and this is how it all comes together in there. So you really get that when some of the, the older soldiers would go, or from the, they'd say, once you've got that sort of ground experience up, you go, you know that you get to be able to do it, which is fortunate for us that we did. And it was really good for the mental state, because then it kind of validated the training and then why they do it as well, which is really important when you're sort of going for these roles. And sometimes people can lose sight of that. Yeah,
definitely good to put it all into practice, so you know that what drills work and don't, and how to be the most efficient, I guess.
Yeah. If it's an old drill that doesn't work, cut it away.
Yeah, exactly. And how long was that trip for?
I think the trips there, they lasted, I think it was for 3 or 4 months, and then we were there. We were there a few weeks beforehand, and then afterwards. So it was definitely not the full 6 months with what the guys from the MRTF were getting, with the Rockall in between. But it was just shy if you were in that sort of leadership role where you would have to go in beforehand, prep, and then do a handover afterwards.
Is that a normal thing for SF to do the setup?
At that point in time, from that era, that they didn't get Rockall, so there was no Rockall. You'd go in, you'd do the job, you'd do the deployment, then you go back home and then go on leave. Yeah.
So how long between was it before your next deployment?
Pretty much, we got back, and then anyone who didn't finish their Rio cycle finished that. But then we did a recruiting drive, and then the cycles came through, and then before we knew it, we were going in. So I think the workup training would have only been maybe 18 months.
Oh, yeah.
In between. Yeah.
So there was always second hook in that time.
Yeah, I got the second hook after that first trip. So after the first trip, from my role there, they presented with the second hook pretty much like as we were sort of leaving, and then we had the formal ceremony back home, and then so like in country, so informally in country, I earned my second hook. Did a formal presentation when I got home, but also at the same time, I'd been put forward for a commendation for my performance over there. So that was a real sort of another feather in the cap in terms of my own personal achievements, to have been recognised for building up that capability,
nice.
Which is something that I always sort of cherish. And I don't really get a chance to be able to talk about that much, but it was, really something special to be able to bed in our capability and be recognised for it for that trip, and then sort of like it kind of hopefully set that benchmark for my predecessor, everyone who followed afterwards, to sort of strive towards in terms of excellence.
Awesome, man. Well done. What was the commendation?
The commendation was I think it was a silver commendation, silver commendation for my performance overseas, in addition to the capability and so on and so forth. So Mick Hindmarsh, General Hindmarsh, had sort of signed off on that, and I don't remember who actually nominated me for it, but that's something I think that they thought that was there. So I think it would have been Major Langford at the time, because I was still reporting directly to him, or one of the other guys, because I had like several masters within the EW thing. So you've got the commander at the time, which is the OC. If you're in the platoons, and you got them, but then there's also the strategic. So you're operating like within the signals commander, the signals, and then EW, and then obviously up to higher as well. So there's a few different people that you have to go to, and sometimes they all don't see eye to eye about what they want in terms of your resources. Like, man, we've only got a small team, and we can do this, but we as for the most part, we were able to achieve what we needed to and provide them with the products they needed.
Yeah, nice. So second deployment, back to the same spot?
Second deployment, the battle space had changed, man. So like they were starting to rely a little bit more on, so they had the SRVs, the Special Reconnaissance Vehicles, which are basically a souped-up 110 Land Rover. Unlike the LRPVs that the guys in the West had. But the Bushmaster had sort of came in a bit more. So the IED threat had increased significantly between rotation 4 and rotation 9. And I was actually a little bit pissed off because our vehicle was with the 2IC was more of a command vehicle as well. So I didn't really like that sort of thing compared to the first one. Oh, I get to be able to be at the back and looking out and all these things. But in hindsight now, I kind of look at it and go, well, thankfully that Bushmaster saved my life. So the IED threat had increased tenfold, I'd say, by that stage, because once you're coming in, and like in Afghanistan, there's only one route in and one route out, or a couple of other. So let's say if you're into forward driving the chicken tracks, right? So you could only go in certain ways, but after a while, the enemy is going to recognize the pattern of life or our SOPs
I know
and
where you're going to go, yeah.
And that sussed it out quite well. So the vehicle-borne IEDs, the pressure plates, the guys, the engineers were working overtime. But our first mission was probably one filled with a lot of incidences, in particular what I call my trauma triangle. Lots of the guys were involved in it. And shortly after coming into country again, we left for an operation called Op Abitura, which was which was pretty much one of the first out-of-area operations that then we were invited to be able to do. So out-of-area operations means out of Uruzgan and into Helmand. Okay. So Helmand being, the UK had, that was one of their area operations. We were invited in to be able to do some other taskings there and provide support to those elements, which involved going into Helmand. And that was like a month or just over a month, for between 4 and 5 weeks of being outside the wire, basically. And we had to drive our whole element there. It was quite impressive to see how many vehicles were there and all the resups that we had. But this is where my working with the engineers at the time, so I'll say who it was, is that I was working with Sergeant Brett Till, and we were talking about the remote IEDs using ICOMs to detonate the IEDs. So there was an RC IED, and the pressure plate IEDs were a big one at the time as well. So I remember I was doing some training with him to be able to bed down what we were going to be doing. So we worked quite closely with the engineers who were doing those things in terms of like how would we report that to them if there was anyone when they were trying to dismantle the bombs, if they find any, and make sure that there's no detonations through comms. So how do we work through the ECM and everything like that? Anyway, a few days into our transit, it was like maybe 3 or 4 days into the transit, and I remember it clearly that we were at this pass starting to head in towards the country into our area of operations, and we came across a cluster of IEDs, and Brett was on, he was like, okay, his guys had found it, and he was called up to the front to be able to dismantle the bomb. And unfortunately, we're all out in there, and he was within sort of, very in close proximity to all of us where we were, because you pretty much stop and prop when you have those things. And he was dismantling the bomb, and that's when it went off. There must have been another third thing that went in, and the bomb went off. I think that was the first time like those spider things had been done, and he was blown up. He passed away in front of all of us. Yeah, so it's a real sort of disheartening and real morale breaker to be able to see a mate perish in that way. And then also the stuff that went on afterwards, I really sort of tipped my hat to the guys who actually go and had to do the cleanup, so to speak, and the post incident events afterwards. But that was that first incident 4 days into a month-long operation and right at the start of our tour, basically.
Yeah, right.
So that was a real big
black cloud over everything.
Black cloud over everything. You know, this shit's real. We're here, and the battle space has changed. And what else? How can that be proven? Well, within 4 days, we had a real big hit, which is someone going home in a casket, or what was left of him.
Yeah.
And I really sort of, with all these things, you got to really take my hat off to really acknowledge the guys who are either in cleanup or provide that security afterwards with all these things. So, so that was the first thing, and that's part one of what I call the trauma triangle for me, because that was the witnessed trauma, right?
Yeah.
So, but you get, like with all traumas, you get the trauma, and then you put it in a box because you're operationally focused, and then you put it away, never to be thought of again, or at least for your tour. We were just at the start of the tour. Okay, we've got to crack on. We've got a job to do still. So even after then, our call sign picked up and did our things and moved on. 2 days later, we'd sort of really entered into, 2 or 3 days later, we'd entered into the area of operations. And we were in a space which was a little bit sus, but it was raining. It was the worst conditions. And we stopped and propped. And I think it rained after the incident, but so we were stopping and propping for a short halt. And I was on the rear gun at the time, doing my thing. So I was manning the Mag 58 at the back. And I remember after that short stop, we went to take off again. And then all I could hear was is basically the chick, and then the boom, and then basically black, and then it was on my back. And it took me a moment to realize then that we'd been hit in some way. So I didn't know it was an IED at the time, but we'd been hit in some way. All I can remember in that flash of moments now, after all the work that I've done, since then, is all I remember was that quick boom, and then sort of feel like this life was flashing before my eyes. In that sense, it's a real cliche thing, but that things slowed down and lots of things went through. Many, many, many thoughts gone through. Next thing, I'm like on my back, in the back of the vehicle, and all I could think of just in that was the self-preservation of my fingers. I just went, are my fingers here? Are my toes here? And I could move my feet. Okay, I'm okay. Is there anything that I'm not feeling at the moment? Pat down the body. Okay, I'm okay. All right. Then comes everything then just comes back with what's happened. All I could smell was cordite. Then start checking in the back of the vehicle. All right, cool. Boom. Radio operator, you okay? Other operators that were in the vehicle, are you okay? Then checking through the vehicles, the driver, the team leader, who was the 2IC, the XO of the company, and then the driver and so on and so forth. So basically, it was like then doing the TTPs of mass casualties, because it ended up that we ran over a 20-kilo bloody anti-tank mine. So to put it into context, our vehicle was a full mobility kill. The front tires were blown off it, and the engine block was pretty much out. Like the engine was pretty much dislodged, and a lot of the guys that were in the vehicle in the time, because of the force of the blast, ended up with traumatic brain injury or the over blast pressure, which is something that the guys are really pointing towards now. That's a big push for that over blast pressure. And then me, I was in the back, and so I think the saving grace in terms of that, of being injured more, was I was holding on to the gun and had my arm in, and I would have been like a essentially a human cannonball because of the blast. The force of the blast was so much that if I wasn't holding on to anything, doing my job, I would have just been, flung out of the vehicle at a top rate of knots. So that was something for me. And back to your commentary before on the Bushmaster, is something that saved my life with that V hull and the way that it was designed. But then again, straight after that, mass casualties, cleared the vehicle, cleared all the mission essential equipment, and just like reorg. So basically, that incident there was the start. It was like the area that we were in was like almost like an ambush area. So we were in contact, and then it had started raining, and it was just all the shitty things that sort of come in. So like, you get out, run over PPID, then there's contact, trying to get all the mass casualties outside of the vehicle, account for all the equipment, do any first aid on it. So I was also qualified as a combat first aider. Boom, okay, before our medics could be brought in, like, let's set a security perimeter, start to get on the comms again to see what's happening. So me and my interpreter, I'm trying to do this, trying to bloody put a catheter into one of the boys so we could give him a bag, all those little things, like a bag of saline, sort of, and make sure that the guys were okay for our casualties, all those reporting, any casevacs that needed to be done, all had to happen at the same time. So even after an incident like that, the processing or the mental state, like you asked before, was, okay, let's do the task, and all your training kicks in, made the guys safe. And it wasn't until afterwards, again, you're like, oh, shaking, these things that you go, fuck, we were in a real gravity situation there. I nearly lost my life. I'm alive, but okay. And then, how am I going to be able to tell my now wife, but my girlfriend, that I was in an incident? You can't, So there's some of the things. It wasn't a few days. So really, all those things happened again. And once we got a replacement vehicle and cross-loaded everything and blew that vehicle up in situ, basically we had to have a few bombs dropped onto that bad boy to make sure it was fully destroyed before leaving it in place, and then kept on rolling with the job. And that's it, man. We're still on our way at this point in time.
Yeah, you're only 6 days in.
Within a week of the first mission, and so that was the lived trauma. I was in an IED blast where there was mass casualties, and obviously, there was no kill. There was no one KIA, but there was a lot of casualties there at the time.
Yeah, that fucking would have been less high fives that time for sure.
Yeah, and then so it's like, let's just dust off and then get back cracking on with the job. So I think that was one of the big things there. And for me, looking back at it as well, I had some moral injury over this. I only realized a few years back, is that where I'll get into the third incident in a moment, but where it was is that I was asked to then, with your job, Andy, what we need you to do is see where there's potential locations where people would enemy would plant IEDs, right? So basically it'd be like map to ground, see where the communications were, and go, where would the likely spot be here within our infill route? So these were spots. And then when I'd sort of done a bit of a post-activity incident report on it, I'm like, oh shit, where that first incident happened, after Brett's one, I'm like, I'd sort of put pins on these potential spots, and one of these spots is the spot that we run over. And so then that was more of a validation then, okay, this is a real important part of the capability of what we need to do, is to be able to go, hey, on these missions here, is do this pre-mission planning, get the old old information and new, and then start to marry it in. So, but I felt guilty because like I'd already had these points, but like trying to be like, look into the crystal ball and give a thing, I was holding on to that sort of trauma for a long time, even though it's not my fault. I couldn't control whether someone would or wouldn't put it in there, but I felt this guilt for a long time that I could have done something else to be able to forewarn people. I'm like, well, you can only forewarn by saying these potential spots. So moving forward from that is that we got into country, we were into the area of operation, we got into one of our we'd been doing some heavy fighting, but this really big tick that we were in, like multiple people, multiple fronts, a lot of stuff happening at the same time. And then this is where that third trauma comes in, which is like the vicarious trauma, I call it, is when Private Damien Tomlinson, their call sign ran over a bomb, and he was manning the gun at the time. So it was one of the warfighting elements, and their vehicle was blown up. And then so the boys, again, that they should have been awarded some medals of gallantry or for stuff with what they did post incident. But they saved, they got Damo out, and he was casevaced, and he subsequently then lost both of his legs, and has done some amazing work in the space now for advocacy for veterans and what he's doing now as a veterans advocate, and then also with Invictus Games and all those things. But with his incident, as the bear and working with the signaller and the comms guy, it's like, okay, what's happening at the time, and you're trying to get him out of to extract him, do his casevac. And so being part of that whole coordination, or being privy to how that all went down, was that third part in the vicarious trauma. So there was three incidences, three different types of trauma. There was the witness trauma, there was the lived trauma, and then the vicarious trauma, which kind of all dealt in. And then that was amongst all the other things that we were exposed to during that tour. It was quite a heavy tour in terms of, like, we were in tick all the time, every other day, in doing our missions. So it was a very busy thing, but to have that happen on our first tour within a fortnight was really something that I didn't think about at the time. But I remember I finally got to speak to my wife, a girlfriend at the time, and all I said was, "Oh, look, baby, look, we've been in. I was in a little bit of a pickle, but I'm all right." And she goes, "Oh, can you tell me more?" I'm like, "No, I'm all right." And then sort of, no news is good news. But then that was it. Sort of like, because I sort of brushed it off the shoulder. But it wasn't until, there was an Anzac Day that sort of happened a couple of weeks later, and we were gone. And one of the boys hadn't sort of, all the comms things had gone in, and the girls were out at an Anzac Day event, and one of the fellas, he'd already had a gut full of booze anyway. It's Anzac Day. He's like, "Oh man, the boys, from when they got blown up with the bomb that they described," because he was just sort of being a bit nonchalant about how he came across, and they're like, "What? They got blown up? What's this?" So, and my wife was with one of the partners of one of the other fellas, I think a couple of them, and they're like, "The boys, what happened to them? They got blown up." And I said a couple of weeks ago, and like, so, when I finally got onto my wife and spoke with her after, which is like a little pickle. A little pickle, mate. That's more than a little pickle. Oh, I can't really tell you that I didn't want to
don't want you to worry.
I didn't want to, alarm you or anything like that. So, so she had a bone to pick with me, but at the same time, she was really happy that I was okay. And so that 3 tours. But look, that was another tour again that really tested us in terms of being able to, in the warfighting, and then also the jobs and the missions that we had, which had changed from the other one, which was like, the first trip, which was a great trip as well. They're different in their own way, but I think there was a lot more, let's say, incidences that happened in this one, and that was just a natural progression of the battle space and the enemy.
Yeah, they adapted and got better with time as well.
Yeah, totally. Man.
Yeah, fuck, that's full on, dude.
Yeah,
I've actually got Damo's book. I started reading a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, it'll be a good read, man. So I can't wait to read it myself. But all these other ones, like old Scott Ryder's, because his book as well, that talks about his experiences. And when I was reading that, in the way that he tells the story, I felt like I was there again. And those things, because you can visualize your point of view from those things that sort of happen, and go, oh, yeah, it's a good way to be able to reframe it without actually being in from your lens. but you go, okay, I can connect with it. That was another part of the story that was happening simultaneously, and this is how that person felt at the time of all those things. So look, it's one of those things that you sort of carry the trauma, then you move it aside, and then you can have a look at it afterwards.
You've got a lot of good sort of views and introspection on things that have happened and how you sort of categorize it. Is that something that something you've learnt post in counselling, or you've studied it yourself, or how did you come up with these sort of?
But both, mate. It has been like a lot of up and down in the 15 years that I'd sort of since I'd been medically retired or medically separated from the military. And so speaking to that, I think it was one of those things where I thought I was going to be a career soldier, Harley. And sort of when I got back from that second trip, a lot of the time it was like tick and flick, just to get you home. But I think that there was some underlying things there, and I just thought it was normal because we kind of did it after the first trip, is get on the cans and do your thing and sort of self medicating as well. Sort of I was just trying to find a way to regulate myself. But then I think what I started noticing was that, an increased level of alcoholism and also trying to get sort of self-medicating from a prescription drugs point of view to get my body regulated again was one thing, because I wanted to go for the next trip. But I noticed that something else was really sort of underlying there, and I didn't really want to sort of step on my own dick again with, with any alcoholic incidences or anything on the town or whatever, because the focus was to go, and then there was also the bear capability, which was really exciting as well. Lots of stuff going on in that space that you needed to be, lots of compartments that you needed to be briefed into. Anyway, so I went and sought out my own help, and that was sort of like, okay, great, sort of I've sorted myself out, I'm good to go again, but I still had really only maybe Band-Aid patched everything. But my own undoing, which I think accelerated the onset of PTSD or how I could sort of deal with it a little bit more or in a better way. So I was what I call coping ugly at the time when I sought my own help, was this thing about being overly honest, like I alluded to before. And the undoing was I had a top secret clearance, and it was just what I thought was going to be another tick and flick. And when you have like a negative vet, or in particular more a positive vet, is they say to you, they being sort of like the leadership, right? Is like they say to you, okay, well, keep your nose clean. If you don't, just tell us, because then that way, be as honest as, be honest and tell us, so then that way no one can subvert you into like, blackmailing you to do something. So if we know everything about you, and this is like, I suppose, from that, telling you in confidence type thing. And so I had my vetting officer come in, and I thought, okay, this is a tick and flick. Was a little bit too honest about how I'd sort of gone out and sought out my own help outside the command, yada, yada, and I'm all right. And I'm thinking, okay, this is cool. Okay, tick and flick done. And a couple of months later, I'm about to sort of thinking about the third deployment starting to come onto the horizon interview, and I was about to go to the US to learn about a new capability that we could then employ. So it was really exciting. I was walking out of our compound with all my gear, about to fly out, and I got pulled in. It's like, hey, Ferms, where are you going? I'm like, well, I'm off to do that thing, And so he's like, no, you're not. And I'm like, well, why's that? And he goes, you lost your clearance, mate. And I'm like, what the fuck's going on here? And so basically where I worked at 2 Commando, you couldn't get into there without having a positive vetted clearance, and especially the troop room where we were. So basically it was like then and then was pretty much the end of my career as soon as we heard that news, because it went to this administrative spiral of trying to find out what had gone on there. So basically I'd lost the clearance, and then they couldn't employ me for what I needed to do. So I ended up in the Q store, and nothing against the guys that work in logistics in the Q store, because they do a fantastic job. They're important part of the wheel. But I ended up being in the back space of the Q store, issuing out mobile phones to the boys, and everyone's going, what the fuck are you doing here? So basically, whilst everything was going on, trying to suss out how I'd lost this clearance, or why it wasn't reinstated, I was in limbo, isolated from everyone and isolated from my team, and people couldn't talk to me because of certain things. So like basically the wall had gone up, and I'm like, oh geez, what's this? So I found myself alone, feeling like I didn't have anyone to support me, which was like it was like a heartbreaker, because when you're doing your training, there's this call that we have, especially in CQB, is where it goes with me, and it says with me, with you. Basically, when you're going through, if you need support, someone with me, someone comes up next to you, then you go together, right? And that always served to be something there that was a lifesaver. And then all of a sudden, I found myself thrust into this wasteland, so to speak, by myself, no one wanting to talk to me, people still being really aloof with trying to support me, and I was just, which brought the onset more of all this stuff that I was trying to sort of work through with alcoholism, increased drinking. And like I was there, I'm like, well, I might as well I'm in limbo, so I might as well just drown my sorrows type thing, finding out what was going on. And shortly afterwards, I was, given the turf, basically. So I went from being hero to being zero in like that. And I wasn't ready.
Just for going and seeing a psychologist on your own accord.
Yeah, I actually went and saw a psychologist. I went and did some AA, and then there was a bit there that I went in, and there was an incident that happened. And there was no drug tests or anything like that. But I said, there was this here. I'm self-medicating, and they said, well, you're on drugs. I went, no. Well, look at the last drug test. So I didn't come up positive at all. But basically, because I'd lost my clearance, the whole thing was, it's easier to get rid of this guy than to be able to ask the right questions about what the circumstances were leading up to this. I think because we were so operationally busy at the time, I understand now in retrospect that, that probably would have been an easier course of action, is to separate the member, make an example of them, and then move on. So it was one of those things where you kind of go, well, then it's like all the boys are like, well, I don't need to speak up about this. So I'm going to go and, so it's like, well, why didn't you went outside of the chain of command to be able to go and seek help here? Yes, I did, because I wanted to be able to keep going for my job. As soon as you say that there's something there, it's like, you're asking all the wrong questions, as opposed to, hey, how can we support you? We've just spent over $1 million training you up, and this job that you're doing, we were going to trust you to go to the States to bring this capability back, but now you're a piece of shit because you said that you had some, some mental health challenges, and now you're just broken. And it's like, well, no, I wasn't broken yesterday. You were trusting me to go here, but now, And then in this whole vetting process, and I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole, but the vetting process was very convoluted at the time, and a lot of the reasons why they used to not actually extend it would have been one of the things. Though at the time, I'll just share one thing, right? So one thing was the whole concept of internet dating was, just RSVP was, there was none of this bloody met on Tinder type thing. But I was like, okay, well, I'm always busy. I'm away, and a man's got needs, so I'm just going to go in and see what this internet dating's like, right? And then so in the post thing said, okay, well, Corporal Fermo has these tendencies to be able to go in here, so there he's a liability because he's wanting to date on the internet, right? And so there was some bullshit spiel about it. I'm like, what the fuck? If you think about this now, Harley, that is just common, right? Okay,
every soldier's on fucking Tinder or Bumble
they
or
swipe right. So, I do DJing now as one of my sort of releases, and in the weddings, when I'm doing a wedding, it's like, how did you meet? We met on Tinder, right? So you think about these things now, and I'm like, okay, that's great. That's another great reminder about why I lost my clearance. But I've resolved that now. But when you have a look at some of the reasoning that they had in that time, is like going outside the chain of command because he didn't want to speak up about a challenge he was having, and also like in his personal life, he was using methods to be able to meet people so that he wasn't isolated in that sort of way in my needs as a man, or in relationships. So that's the thing. And you think it's almost comical now, right?
Yeah.
But being turfed in the way that I did, separated earlier than it was from someone who thought that was going to be a career soldier, that unraveled and was the trigger for everything to unravel afterwards. All those stored traumas really came out. And when I didn't have that support of having something to focus on, and that, it was really a massive spiral downhill for me. Once I was separated from the military, Harley.
How long did it take were they trying to admin sep you and you're now going down the medical pathway?
No, I was medically recognized after I was administratively discharged.
Yeah. Okay.
So it was in post basically. So yeah.
So
and we
how long?
We had to fight for that. We had to fight for that because a lot of the time now, when I was separated from the military, it was so operationally focused, and this wasn't really it had the occurrences of what was happening hadn't really happened that much. So, from open arms to the DVA process to the claims process, these were all starting to be done in warlike conditions again, which hadn't really been done since Vietnam. And I don't want to discount Timor or what people had experienced in Timor as well, because there was lots of stuff that going on there. But from what was seen doctrinally as, war fighting, a lot of it hadn't happened, and the discharge in this way. So we had to actually really fight to have that recognised, because all the onset and, all the psychologists afterwards, when I was out, I could actually see a psychologist or psychiatrist that we could really unpack a lot of stuff. I was seeing a psychiatrist as well as it was VVCS then, and then really being able to unpack all the things and think, okay, well, that makes sense. So from all the reporting, when they finally, my claims that finally had the claims gone through, those conditions were accepted. But that's another thing again, I'm still fighting now for some stuff that had happened in my claims. So it takes a long time. Not that saying that it is, when that's a long, different conversation to be able to be had. But being in that space and the way that I was separated from the military and the fights afterwards, that I have to be able to justify things, was it's been monumental, and there's been a big administrative, disservice from those organisations which I speak to at the moment. But at the same, that's for my own case, right? But at the same time, with the work that I'm doing is one thing. But it took a long time, Harley, for me to get sorted out.
When did you? When did all that happen? When did you get out?
Sorry.
What year was that all this happened, that you got out?
That was in 2010. So 2010, I was shortly afterwards. I'd been at the unit for 5 years. I was discharged from the unit, and without not knowing anything. So I really hadn't come to terms with. I hadn't even been diagnosed as PTSD. So I was lost in the wilderness, mate. So I'd felt like I was banished, and the boys weren't talking to me because they were always away doing their thing. It was such a busy period. So I was living in Sydney with my girlfriend, Claire at the time, now my wife, and we didn't have any support because she was from Perth as well. But we did have friends there and support, but just that frequency of having that routine and being with the boys, that was my life. You know what I mean?
So what did
And my relationship with Claire, really, I'd only just started really dating her before my second trip. So from someone having someone that was important in their lives, it was just all military up to that point. So it was very difficult at the time. But I remember once I was out and I could see all the specialists and doing that, it was like a big burden had been lifted off. And it was something that I wish that could have happened to me within the command, but it was after. So I was still really coming to terms of trying to recognize that. And it took a long time, but I could remember I'd go in when I was seeing my specialists and I'd see one of the boys from the unit, and they'd be like this, that look. Harley, it's like, oh no, Andy's gonna go and yap to all the people there, and because I was doing all this mental health work, I'm like, man, good to see you here. Are you self admitted, or did you get told, oh no man, like this is on the DL? I'm like, mate, don't worry, I could see the look on your face that you think that I'm going to gob off to everyone and tell everyone that hey, look, Jono's blah blah blah, he's a bit crazy. No, I said, look, mate, if you need to be able to do it, this has been my situation. Look, you go and see him and sort it out, but just keep your mouth shut in terms of if you're self doing this, because that could be detrimental to you. And then I gave them the reasons why, and they're like, oh, okay, cool. So at least that way, it was part of the thing there with people especially with clearances. One of the things that I could do at that time was just to be able to, hey, here's some forewarning, man. Just don't speak out too much, especially with your vetting officers, to be able to do some stuff there, and get it done. And whether it's right or wrong, if people who wanted to be able to have a prolonged career in there, it was a real taboo subject at the time, Harley. And it took me a long time, a lot of exposure therapy to unpack a lot of things and a lot of stuff. I had several jobs that were great but weren't suited. Like, I got out of the army on a Wednesday it was or whatever, and I was watching MasterChef at the time, and my first job straight away was, it only took me like a couple of days to get another job. I was watching MasterChef and I thought, well, how hard could this be? Self-taught cook, I like cooking, so I'm going to get a job. So I went to like 3 of the most prestigious 3 chef hat restaurants in Sydney, all got a call back, and they went, okay, we're mature age apprentice. This guy's got the skills. He's got the, communication skills, and all we need to do is just teach him how to use a knife and, Casey Ryback type stuff, bloody, chopping. This isn't a chef, type thing. This is not a knife. And anyway, I digress. So, I got a mature age apprenticeship, which the company that I was working for at the time then really leveraged from that, and my avoidance from having to work on myself with the PTSD that was really onsetting quite a lot more. And I found myself doing things there, trying to then be of service, like sort of in the middle of the night in George Street in the middle of town. Sometimes like you could see a fight's brewing, and then you'd sort of say some stuff to instigate it to go on, and then when a fight would then break out, then you go in and and then it's like, well, what the fuck are you doing, Andy? Like, why are you doing these things? Or there was one time someone had broken into the restaurant and tried to steal some stuff, and I ended up grabbing my knife and chasing the guy down bloody George Street. You know what I mean? Until they picked off, and I'm like, oh, hold on, what are you doing, Andy? Like, like a possessed dude with a knife running after. Like, obviously he stole some stuff, but like when I sort of thought about it retrospectively, I'm like, okay, well, what would you have done then, Andy? Like seeing red and this dude, I think that the escalation of force would have been even more. So I was like, okay, this isn't working for me. I've proposed to my wife. We've got we're planning for a wedding at this point in time. As much as this is a great opportunity, you're nearly finished with this apprenticeship in such a short amount of time, you need to actually work on yourself. So basically, that was what happened, man. Like, it was just intensive stuff there, like not inpatient, but outpatient, but because I was still trying to find the thing there, and doing a lot of work on my own self-care and mental health and everything like that. There were the initial stages where I was like, okay, you just need to down tools, and this is your work now. You're no longer a soldier, accept that. And you trying to fluff around doing these other bits and bobs is you just avoiding having to sort of deal with the pain, basically. So let's avoid pain, let's avoid thoughts, let's avoid all these things, and which didn't really sort of help. It was again coping ugly, which means so I didn't mention what the coping ugly to me means. So coping ugly means being able to do whatever means to be able to get by, and it might not be the best and most efficient way to be able to do it, but at the time, it helps at the time, but it's not a prolonged tool that's going to be efficient or the best use of what you're doing. So, there are other better ways, but this is like the blunt end basically to do it. So, that was the work for a good while.
Yeah. I think as a general rule, fucking any soldier getting out of a high pressure military environment needs to stay away from fucking chefing. Walking into a high pressure cooker of drugs and alcohol and fucking aggressive
Yeah.
kitchens.
Well, yeah, the kitchen scene, and that's the thing, is that moving from that scene again, I'm like, okay, I don't want to be walking into that type of environment, especially with my mental health not being, in retrospect, like I was still in avoidance, right, and not acceptance. I was avoiding. I'm like, okay, well, there's all these things that are available to me now, and fuck you, I'm no longer serving. I can do what I want, which isn't really the best way to be able to be doing things, because I had so much. At the time, I was so jaded and I was so angry, and there was so much poison sort of lashing out of me from this. Not that I really knew it, but I could just see now, looking back at the things that I was doing, or how I was kind of lost before doing all that work really sort of came in, and it was
the
hard.
luxury. You didn't have the luxury of the modern soldier either, right? Of the medical system really looking after you and making sure that when you do get out, you've got, your pension and your in-cap and everything sorted. So you got at least a year to get yourself right. You were fighting demons on your own, trying to work it out without any of that support and help.
Yeah, absolutely. It wasn't until I actually found a really good my advocate, and he was an old Vietnam ex SAS guy. He was the head of the sub branch in Asheville that was closest to me at the time, in the SAS Association, and he had a bit more of an affinity to the guys who were working within Command. So a lot of the guys from 2 Commando, and being their advocate. So we got everything accepted, but with my personal case with DVA is that they accepted it, but there was nothing that was rated on lifestyle. So basically, it just gave me a white card. It should have been a gold card from the outset, but it was a white card that went in. There was a lot of administrative issues that went in, and even with my case, we had to fight because, like I mentioned, okay, this is the new work for you now, and I had David on there. It took a long while before even DVA had said, "Hey, we've got incapacity payments or interim payments that we could do to keep you afloat for now." It wasn't until for a long time until we found out, and said, well, that would really help the burden of going, hey, I'm going to let my mental health and well-being deteriorate because I'm trying to just work and put things together to keep a roof over my head. And for those of you who don't know, live in Sydney or Melbourne or any of those other cities, when you have RA and you're living in the inner west, at the time in 2010, that like a one or two bedroom studio could cost on Civvy Street, $800 a week. When you don't have that, when you're working as a mature age apprentice on $15 an hour type thing, it's just doesn't quite make, so you start doing a few other things and to try and make ends meet. And once I found out about the incapacity payments or the interim payments, at least it was a relief. So then that way I could concentrate on that first stage of accepting and doing the hard work to really unpack a lot of the trauma with specialists. And it was intensive, man. Like it was 5-6 days a week with a psychiatrist and then with the psychologist as well, or the VVCS person.
Yeah, right. How long did that last for, the intensive stuff or period?
Oh, good 6 months, man.
Yeah.
It was a good 6 months. Because I still kind of refused to do the inpatient thing at the time. So, and that was just my mindset still trying to come to. So I was doing the outpatient programs, and then as well as going in to see my counsellor at VVCS, which is now Open Arms, and just really intensive unpacking everything. So there was a few different modalities that they were testing for PTSD at the time. Obviously, it hadn't really been brought in as much as what it is now. So I just dove deep into that. So really, to answer, circling back around to what you said, is did I know all these reflective questions now? No, not at the time. But in the 15 years that have been out now, which seems a long time to how long I served, which was 10 years, is that there's been a lot of ups and downs with my PTSD, and now I've got a much better grip or much better tools and ways to be able and mindset to think about how I manage that, because it never goes away. But it's just it's like getting a physical thing and then having a shoulder done or an ACL, and you can get back on the footy field, but it's a certain trigger that might recur the injury. So that's where I'm at now is just making sure that I'm doing something every day in my own self-care. But for a long time, it took ages to be able to get to that point of and doing a lot of the work. So a lot of people, I find, will also run away from the pain so that you can get, like a lot of the time in that sort of old mentality of traditional care is here's the magical pill, here you go, this will medicate you. And look, I think I agree that there is place for a pharmaceutical intervention in someone's healthcare plan, right? Because I can't say, well, you don't have the pain or you don't do this. But in my own healthcare, what I was noticing is the magical pill, and I didn't like the way it felt. But then there was a few of the boys who were starting. There was a few other fellas that were getting out in similar circumstances, and then there was this occurrence of people being really medicated all the time, and then that's a couple of years later. That's when the whole, a lot more suicides were happening. I know a few of the boys that had suicided, and then that drumbeat started coming on for the Royal Commission when there was really quite a high volume of people that I'd known personally or through friends of friends that you go, okay, well, there was only like a couple of degrees separation that had happened. So I did a lot of the work for them because there was some suicidal ideologies probably in the later bits. I could get to Broken House a bit down the track, but in that case there, I was like, okay, I just need to do the work now and then do it. So like the David Christie, my advocate, was like, Andy, like I know that you're in this environment, and at one point, you feel like you're 10 foot tall, but now you're not. So you need to be able to look after number one first. You're not in the system now where you got to look after you and your mate and your team and your platoon and all that sort of stuff. It's like, no, it's just you now. And you need to look after your best interests to make sure then that way you can live a meaningful life. To get your head sorted is the first one, or get your claims and everything and your body sorted out, and then start thinking about transitioning into a new vocation.
Yeah. So over that 15 years from that fucking tragic separation to where you are now, what sort of led to starting Invisible Injuries and making that sort of move?
Yeah, well, great question, man. So fast forwarding to all that, we'd moved to the Central Coast and then to Noosa. Noosa was because we had our second child, and we were still living on the East Coast, and mother-in-law had moved up to Brizzy, so we thought we needed to move to close to there because I was like, I love the East Coast, don't want to go back to WA. That was my life. Like there was everything that was on the East Coast for me because I'd spent more time over there. I spent just over 20 years there in the end before moving back. And we were in Noosa, and there's a play thing that we called Broken House. So we were trying to secure a home, and we secured this home under the type of property. I was in property at the time, property investment, and it was a different way of property investment. So basically I was trying to secure the home under these methods, which we did, but then a few unforeseen things that sort of happened. There was a banking royal commission that had happened, and so the banks had really tightened up. They tightened up their lending criteria, and we'd secured this home. We were trying to do it. So basically, at every stage then was like, okay, to get this, you need to jump this high. So every time we'd jump that high, they'd say, no, the goalposts have changed. We've got to try and move this. Long story short, over the course of a year, we had this thing where it was brooding in my head. I was like, okay, every time you tell us to do something, I'm trying to secure it. So I'm just going to go and do that. So I ended up having like several jobs on the go at the same time. And what was following was the deterioration of my mental health because I was just so tunnel focused on securing a home loan for a house that, and then my wife was also working her ass off as well to try and do this. And it all culminated where we couldn't secure the house, but we dropped a shitload of like the war chest, so to speak, had been depleted in trying to renovate this old 120-year-old Queenslander home that we'd had. Uh-huh. And we couldn't end up securing it. So what happened is that we ended up, I was like at a real low point. So with the several jobs that I had to put on like this face, right? The smiling face. But really deep down, I was like breaking apart because I wasn't doing my own self-care. We'd moved to Noosa and I couldn't get the specialists. So there's a lot of specialists out there, but there were so many high concentration of veterans and first responders in the Southeast Queensland region that there was no spots for the specialists to take on new clients. So I had to wait over 12 months. So all this thing was happening from moving to Noosa. But over that time, I didn't really have the specialists to sort of come in because I was waiting for a specialist spot to open for them to take on a new client. So my focus then was this tunnel vision, avoidance of just sorting some stuff out. And when we couldn't secure our home and our war chest was depleted, I was just in this really bad mental health state where I was at the worst, rock bottom. Basically, we were given, it was just before Christmas, and we were given this ultimatum. It says, okay, cool. You just need to pack your stuff into a small room, what you have, and then, go for basically we were homeless, and we found a place in Kilkeven, which is in the back, in the Sunshine Coast hinterland, at the caravan park. It was full, but old mate sort of, I think he was a veteran and he took us on. So, oh man, that's a real shit situation that you're in. So basically we were homeless. Living underneath what is seen as the poverty line, but we tried to make it seem that it was really good for the kids. So we call it broken house because me mentally as well as Claire was broken. There was suicidal ideologies happening, and we tried to make the most out of this bad situation in Kilkeven. Told the kids it was a big camping adventure, etc. And it was for them, we hoped that we gave that to them, but under that sort of smile was someone that was really at that point in time not in a good space. There's suicidal ideologies. There's a couple of guys that had sort of suicided, and my wife has her own sort of thing there with that topic in her own family. So that was probably one of the things that sort of kept me going. And then also that lifeline from the owner of this caravan park. But we were in a really bad spot. I think we were there for like 6 weeks over that period, and we got home. So that when we were in Kilkeven, there was another really cool thing that happened. We did a little bit of a tour, as a bit of a winery tour, and got some wine as takeaway. But we were sitting there over the campfire, and my wife said, "Look, I just feel like running away. We've taken so many knocks over the last couple of years. Like, I just want to run away." And I said, "Well, I'm an ex-soldier. Like, I don't run. I'm a fighter." And then she's like, "Well, why don't we document your journey, right? And then maybe we can see what other people are doing, and then perhaps we can see what services are out there, because it took me a long time to finally get the services. So I had to learn how to navigate finding support networks." And then maybe we could do a tour. So instead of running away, we could do a tour that talks about PTSD. And I'm like, oh, that might be all right. So that was really the birth of Invisible Injuries at the time, to be able to document at first through our podcast that we have, was document my story and the stories of my peers and how they've gotten out of their own situations, so that they could, it was more of a, how do we inspire people to think pro-life and what it is, what's out there, and what services are available in dealing with PTSD. And so that was really the start of it. So that was at the end of 2018, Christmas. And then it took another year to be able to then learn, because I didn't have any money, to reestablish ourselves, but then learn about how to do a charity and how can I apply for a charity. People said, "Oh, you need tens of thousands of dollars to pay someone to set it up for you." I said, "Well, no, I don't have that." So I didn't have that luxury. So I was like, okay, well, I'm going to learn how to do it myself, and then learn from examples. So it took a good year to be able to finally get through. And then after that year, we got the fantastic news from the AC&C that our application had been successful. And so we were recognised formally as a charity or as a non-for-profit, and then in an ESO space. So that was the birth of Invisible Injuries through lived experience again. And I went, well, I'm not a clinician. Let's just go about this, about what it is from a lived experience point of view, and how can we support people. And then that's how I also discovered during this time of work being in that space, it still took a few more months until I had a specialist. And because it was still like walking on eggshells, my wife rang my mate, who was in, my mate Shane, who's a veteran. And anyway, he lived on the Gold Coast and he'd just be getting into this breathing thing. And the first time we talked about this breathing, which was Wim Hof method at the time, and we've come way since then, right? So the Wim Hof, no one knew about him, but he'd been speaking to Wim and they'd been supporting him. He goes, mate, come down south. And so Claire had called him. I thought, okay, this is a boys' trip away. And anyway, we went to a place called Mount Warning. And I thought on the way down, I'm driving down the Bruce. I'm like, hey, man, what booze do you want me to get? And he's like, no, it's going to be dry. And I'm like, oh, hell, man. I thought this was a boys' trip, right? You know, we're going camping, campfires. And anyway, I'm like, okay, all right. I suppose I probably don't need the alcohol because of my mental state at the moment. So I said, okay, well, what are we going to do, man? Like, bloody, do you want me to bring the steaks and sausages and that sort of thing? He goes, no, man, we're going a little bit more vegan and detoxing. I'm like, oh, my God, my world's coming.
What am I signed up for?
No booze, no steaks and burgers and talking shit. I'm like, can we talk shit? He goes, oh, we can talk shit. I'm like, okay, that was the saving grace, right? But thinking, okay, well, what type of boys trip is this going to be if we can't, you know? So anyway, we get to Mount Warning and set up. He goes, in the morning, we'll go up to the top of the hill. So anyway, we made our way up to the top of the hill to watch the sunrise. And that was one of the other first pivotal moments again to go, okay, well, this is a mindful moment. I didn't know it at the time, but we're just sitting together. Andy, shut up. Let's just watch the sunrise. And this was really nice. And it kind of reminded me of being, you know, in one of those OPs, seeing the pattern of life before a big mission over in the GAN, looking at the sunrise coming up. I'm like, this is just really nice, you know. And then so as we're coming down the hill, it had been raining down there, and you know, because that's where the jungle warfare school was at the time before Tully. And anyway, it was like fully raining, and then he goes, have you done an ice bath before? I'm like, nah. And then so he said, you want to give it a shot? Like, yeah. He goes, okay, well, let's go now. And anyway, I gave every excuse under the sun not to do this ice bath, but in the end, he goes, you know, I don't have bathers. Because mate, we'll just go in our jocks, right? You know, yeah, but are you scared? I said, no, I'm not. Let's do it. So we were there sitting in this ice bath in the creek, and the people are walking past us, going, "What the hell are you guys doing?" And anyway, so that was the first step into the ice bath, which I felt invigorated afterwards. It was like this hard reset that I needed to be able to start with something. And then we got down to the bottom and he goes, well, you know, you're kind of at rock bottom, Andy, like after I told him what had happened to us. He goes, so I guess now being at rock bottom, you'd be open to something else, you know? And I'm like, oh, what's that? He goes, that breath work that you gave me shit for. And I'm like, okay, yeah, well, nothing could get worse than this. And then so basically, he gifted me this course with Wim, which I did, and you know, so that was in 2018, and so I've been doing it ever since now. So now breathwork's exploded like massively, and there's all these people that are doing it, but I've been doing it every day since this time now, and and I found the more that I did this breath work, which started off with the Wim Hof style, but there's other modalities that we've since gone and educated ourselves on. But he's always been there as a friend and a mentor. And so I really got to credit him. So what that did with me when I started doing the breath work was it enabled me a way to be able to self-regulate in between those times where I was either waiting for a specialist or waiting in between specialist appointments or getting frustrated with DVA. Instead of when I could feel my levels rising up with my PTSD, I could do these methods to bring what we call SUDS down, subjective units of distress scale, which is what they call SUDS. We bring those SUDS levels down, and then that way I could go about my day as best as I could without letting things snowball. So that was one thing that really sort of helped out in that dark time while I was waiting for all those things to happen that I could really do. So then as that rabbit hole went down, then COVID happened. We were already balls deep in trying to plan this tour and had already been into my bad spot. So really when COVID happened and the lockdowns all happened, people were in this really bad spot. but I'd already been through this war that we'd had. Like, we'd already been through the shit. We'd been homeless and lost everything. So it was kind of like this bittersweet thing where we'd been through that. So we had these tools already to do it in terms of coping mechanisms. And I was in a little bit of a better spot. And then that just gave me a chance to be able to plan our mental health awareness campaign a little bit more. So we weren't going to let COVID be a war stopper. Yes, it was like another 8 months or 9 months until the lockdowns could happen, but that allowed me to be able to really step up.
Yeah, awesome. It's a really important message that it's still very prevalent, right? Like people that are dealing with all sorts of mental traumas and PTSD and stuff that are not speaking up because the fear of losing their career and losing their job, which will just fucking heighten everything, right? Because they've got trauma that they need to deal with, but then if they lose their job, then they've also got to deal with the loss and the grief of losing their fucking identity. So it's still something that's very prevalent. I see in the Defence Force now.
Oh, absolutely, man. And I think as well for leaders, there's the person, the help seeker, or the person that is experiencing it. But for leaders, is that teaching the leaders the best way to communicate and how to ask the right questions is the one thing, right? Which you kind of like, which I've learned subsequently now, especially with all the suicide prevention or suicide planning, not suicide planning, but like, the self-care plans around that, is how you communicate with people and ask them the questions and felt that they're heard. Like you have a leadership role here and shit rolls downhill and it's like really authoritarian in terms of, you get given a set of orders. From a commander's perspective, it's like, hey, how can I be empathetic to this person? And instead of going, hey, just, shake it off and you'll be right and get back, crack on with it. It's like, okay, well, what factors of, what's been happening in your life lately, and how does that look for you on a day-to-day basis, and how can we best support you? We've just invested a shitload of money in your training and all this stuff. How can we get it so that you can be back on the field again? Like in say high performance sports, they don't kick someone out because they get injured. They actually work them to be able to get back on the field so then that they could keep playing. But the military, in that sort of sense at the time, they weren't asking how can we best support you? And how can we do it so that it's not seen as being weak, but you're just you're vulnerable at the moment, but let's just build up that armor for you again and provide a supportive environment to do so. I think that that's a big one that's still, and I've been separated for a long time from the military, but those questions that are sort of prevalent within, corporate and then in those other jobs now, the questions are there without being woke and without being politically correct. I think that the way those processes are done and handled in that communication can be done a lot better in the military. They're not often asked by that, or having commanders that are not willing to be able to go down that line because it's a harder, more difficult method than to be able to just go, hey, this is the too high basket, let's just fuck them off.
Yeah, definitely. And all the fucking issues with retention and everything, and all the issues with how soldiers are getting, suicidality and everything afterwards, should be fucking making some changes in that space for sure. In the exit space, how they deal with, like you said, help them rather than just fucking good to us anymore, get out.
Yeah, totally.
So what does invisible injuries actually do?
Okay, yeah, no worries. So with that, great question, man. So when we were there at that time, we were thinking, how is it that we can support people? And one of the big things was like, we've seen how the from one, like an administratively, your case with DVA has been an epic, monumental fuck up of epic proportions. It's taken you a while to be able to find out what services are available here and really come to grips with your story. So when Claire was like, hey, let's just follow your story now and how you can navigate to finding what ESOs are out there or finding specialists that are there, how can you navigate that so that it's the least done? How can you then go back to your experience in that initial phase with your advocacy just to get conditions accepted, but then also know where the pitfalls are with what happened with yours, and 0 lifestyle points is their bare minimum that happened to you. How can we get it so that someone can actually do claims and know how to be able to present their case in the best way so that they get the best possible outcome is one of the things, right? Without going, I know the system, I know how to rort it. No, that's not the case. It's like, how can myself as a veteran know how to articulate what it is that I want to do? And an example is, on your worst case day now, like, are you in pain? Yes, I'm in pain. But someone who used to be in the military, oh, no, it's all right. I'm just going to shake it off. You're not really saying what the severity of that injury might be. So I think it's just coming to grips with being able to say, hey, look, you need to be vulnerable and allow yourself to do this. Now, coming to what Invisible Injuries does now. So that was the precursor behind it in the background. So what Invisible Injuries does is we support veterans, first responders, and their immediate support that are experiencing post-traumatic stress and other well-being and mental health issues, which has come at a later stage. And we do that through evidence-based holistic wellness methods. Like, we're not the clinicians. This all comes from a lived experience point of view, in the fact that it's like, if something has worked for me, is there any reason why it can't work for you? Or something that's similar to to what your preferences are might work for you. So here's the thing, is that our view was to be able to do this through things like breath work. Yoga came afterwards as well. So I'm being curious about how can I still train or do my self-sufficient stuff. Strength and conditioning with my injuries. So the yogas that have came into effect, or Pilates as well. And how can I have a positive mindset around this? This was like coming into all these limbs, right, that have come off, that have now been proven from an evidence-based way to be able to have to be able to self-regulate in your self-care plan, right? Which is in a supplement to your specialist care. So it's not the golden bullet to make everything go away. It's not the golden pill that'll magic. You still have to do the work with your specialists, right? Psychiatrists, psychologists, EPs, and all those things. But these tools are there for the times in between.
Yeah.
Right. But sometimes the things in between, like, you might do a course and go, yeah, that was a wicked course. I'm really motivated now. I'm really motivated now. But then after all that sort of runs out, when the dust settles, it's like, okay, well, what am I doing now? So how can I keep things going on from that point of view? And then that's how Invisible Injuries support someone. And really at the crux of it was because of the guys that we knew that had suicided, and then some stuff that had happened in my wife's family as well, is like, well, how can we keep people in a positive mindset so then that way they think more pro-life as opposed to everything's so hard, I'm going to suicide. And so if what the idea is when we first started is if we could only help one person from suiciding or keeping in a better mindset, because then one, for them, that's pro-life, and then for the immediate support network and friend network around them, suicide can really have a big impact on all those things that are surrounding it. So if we can only help one person, it's all worth it. And so that's where it's come to now with our service offering of people here in WA. We've got the online presence of being able to, here's the stuff that's free to you. And if you're, I'll backtrack a moment. So where Invisible Injury sits as an ESO that's supporting it, we're sort of like the first port of call or the first aid before someone's seeking further an organisation that has more resources than us, right? So we're here, right? So if someone's got like, okay, I'm just coming to grips with what I'm at, and I need to find a tool here that might give me an idea for something. I'm waiting for my claims to go through, so I don't have these, my white card or my claims where I could do these other things or more resources available to me. This is where we sit. And then from there, then when people's claims go through and they're in more of a position to be able to do more work, this is where they go on and with the other ESOs. Does that make sense?
Okay. So you're like a starting point.
We're starting point to be able to go in, but also we're starting point to be able to provide in our in-person offerings is go, well, look, if I've started to dip into these things again, how am I feeling about actually re-engaging in the veteran community or with people or first responder community with people after I've been out for a while? I'm ready to sort of dip back in, but I don't need to be an AJ again, so to speak, or whatever it is in the other services. So that's one of the things. Or even sometimes it's like, okay, we're providing these things because when you get out, I always have a bit of a laugh about it, right? So it's like, when the SF guys used to get out, they'd either be, I'm gonna study at uni and I'm gonna do counterterrorism university course. So I'm going to get out and I'm going to become a PT, or I'm going to join the other forces. So, or I'm going to go consulting. Do you have these jobs that get out and people do these things? And it's similar to like with, say when you when you're dealing with PTSD, it's like, okay, I'm going to see my specialists and I'm going to get medicated. And these are the things that I'm going to take, or these are the pain meds that I've got to be able to do this. What we present is another way to go, hey, look, if I'm asking these questions, or this isn't for me, like, doing the work with the specialist is great, but maybe those pills that numb my feelings and all this stuff isn't helping. So maybe I might look at other ways to be able to do strength and conditioning. Oh, there's the yoga. How can I, I'll get to the shops now and things are triggering me. What are the things that I can do? I can do some breath work while I'm waiting in the line. That brings my levels down so I can still do stuff within my sphere of influence. I'm suffering from PTSD at the moment, and like I need to be able to. The script is flipped now in being like, in what's seen as being a man, and like I know I'm working on my own thing now. The missus is doing a little, what's seen as some other work, but I've still got part-time work. But now I've got to take the kids in and sort out my own mental health. Okay, well, I need to go to the shops. I need to go and see my specialists, and I might need to go and do the school run or whatever it is. How can I put systems in places around going to these spheres of influence? Can I do now so that it doesn't set my PTSD off, so that I could still be useful in a family unit or in a relationship or something like that, given my and deal with my mental health and well-being, right? And still feel like I'm leading a fulfilling life in whatever that might look like for me. So I set the terms of success. So that's where Invisible Injuries is really being able to support, and what we're doing now through either the online presence or through our in-person offerings. So we don't need to be everything to everyone. I think that quality is much more than the quantity. So the people who come in and do the things that we're offering are supposed to find it, or they're feeling that they're finding a benefit from the courses there. We don't need to fix everyone, because that's not the case, right? Not everyone that leaves them in the military is going to be broken. They live fulfilling lives that go in. But that's a narrative that they've said, that every soldier that's ever served is all going to be broken. That's not the case, man. But for those who are, or those who are experiencing, transition challenges or mental health and wellbeing challenges, there's services out there, and that's the thing. So it's like, okay, we're one of many. And if you feel that you can stick with what we're doing in terms of, if you connect with that content, then go for it. If it isn't for you and you've got one of the 7,000 other ESOs out there that you feel that you go with, throw shit on the wall and see what sticks, mate. Have a go. Because if you try once and went, oh, that didn't work for me, well, you're not really doing yourself any favors by just giving up.
Yeah. Same thing with psychology and stuff, right? Or a personal trainer or an EP or a physio.
Yep.
I went to the physio, shit, didn't help. Like, okay, well, that physio probably didn't help, but it doesn't mean physiotherapy doesn't help. Or psychology. Psychology is a big one.
100%. And so that was the biggest thing, is that what we try and do now is we're really big on collaborations, because we know that people might not be okay, like I teach in a certain way, but you want to go and get something because you get something from it, but that might not be the right teacher for you. That's okay. I'm not going to get insulted by that. But here's some people that we do work with that you might have been. And that's why I'm so big on collaborative efforts now with the other organizations, because one, they might have a scope that's outside of what we do, or it might be a natural progression from what we do, or it could be like, hey, you've got a similar thing to what we have, but maybe you might be more, your personality is more matched to that person.
you know?
Yeah, 100%.
Not that happens, but you want to kind of give people the options to be able to say, hey, in my own self-care plan, if I was actually determining what it is that's important to me, I can actually go out and do it instead of waiting for someone to tell you, hey, this is the person that you need to go to. And it goes back to what, that David Christie, his my first advocate said, mate, you got to look after number one and find out what works for you according to what you set out. Right? Your measure of success is only what you set out now, not what the Joneses are doing now and what you think you've got to be. It's like, okay, well, I'm doing this now. Am I having something that I'm enjoying and being fulfilling? How can I have methods and ways to be able to deal with challenges as they come? And then that's the resilience piece that comes in, you know?
Yeah. Nice, dude. Fucking any parting words of wisdom you want to give us? We're over 3 hours. We've set a new record.
The parting words, is let me just start off with if you're in a spot and then it's fresh, it's okay to not have the plan transitioning out straight away. One of the things that you kind of want to do is as much as it might be a pain in the ass for you because you're so jaded about whatever it is due to your separation. Even if you have separated, is going, hey, let's just get any stuff and supports in place as possible, because the longer the time goes, the harder it is. So just say, getting all your bloody, if you're going to do any claims, put them in. If you're going to set up and join a sub branch or any organizations, do so as you're sort of getting out, or if you're out, is do so, because then that way you might not use them straight away, but knowing where to go at the time when you do finally get to use them, if that ever occurs, is how to be able to engage. And that's a big one, is knowing what's available and how to engage should that happen is the first one.
Yeah,
and
don't close yourself off.
Not knowing a plan of what the next thing is absolutely okay. I know, and I'm talking to someone who might be experiencing either has been separated medically or along that lines, right? Is that you don't need to know what's going to happen straight away and have it all mapped out, because you've got the rest of your life to be able to do that. People get really scared. So putting those things in place so you can have those things like interim payments or whatever while you need to do whatever work you do is a great way to go in and seek out lots of services. And then people more or less will then be more willing to help if you go and ask for it, right? So it's overcoming that ego and going, hey, how can I actually go and ask for help? Or even learning about how can I communicate with my partner, right? The way that they don't need to know what it is what I went through, whatever that might have been, but they could be a sounding board for you to go, hey, look, I'm not in this way, but this is how I can be supported by you best, right?
Yeah.
Is going in and if you've got someone that's an immediate support network that could be there, that's a big thing, is swallow your fucking ego and go and let's do this together and do this without, hopefully coping ugly for too long. So that's that sort of second bit, right? And then the third bit is you actually have to do the work, right? So just say if you go to the physio and they give you a whole bunch of exercises to go in, or say you see your psychologist or specialist and they give you a whole bunch of stuff to do and you don't do it, who's the person that's actually going to be not benefiting from the work, right?
Yeah,
just do
and
the
then they
work.
blame the physio because of...
Here's the medicine. Well, it tastes bad, so I'm not going to take it. Well, just fucking eat it, and do the work. No. Actually, I should have been a little bit more touchy-feely than that. But look, if there's work to be done,
that works.
Go and do the work, because then it's in your own best interests to be able to get better. And the third thing I would be, okay, I'll go fourth thing. So third thing in closing is going, well, look, no, it went over my head. It's going, look, I think that the process, that it is going to be long. So if you're experiencing some issues, it doesn't take long to be in a good spot, or if you're in a good spot, it doesn't take long for the wheels to fall off. So as soon as you go, hey, I feel better now, and I forego doing all those things, the wheels will fall off pretty quickly. So if you don't have the tools to be resilient in being able to do that now, that is one big thing, It is going, look, I just need to maintain it. If you're into working out and doing this, it's like
keep the body guessing. So if I'm doing this one way, I might try and do it another way. Then that feels like I'm, and things might change for you over time. So depending on your situation, where whether you're singly when you got out, then you've got a partner, then kids or whatever things come into life changes. So as will your self-care plan over time based on what your needs are, right? So that's the thing. Don't be scared to be able to try different things or do things that are best suited to your situation, because, the military doesn't care, is that you need to actually, even though there's supports out there, right? You go, well, I need to do what's best for myself and for my family or people that are important around me, so I could live a fulfilling life that's within what I set as what a measure of success is. That's the biggest one, right? At the end, set success here is what I'm happy to be able to do this, and no one else is going to tell me whether that's successful or not. As much as you can when you see the boys again and you go, oh, what's been happening, man? You get, stick your chest out and you try and do all these things. But really, at the end of the day, it's about trying to make sure that you have tools to implement when you need them, a support system that's there that works best for you, right? So even if it takes a long time, seeing what sticks and finding out, and then also being able to look on your support networks there, is a big one.
Yeah, for sure. Beautiful, dude.
Thanks for having me on the show.
Good story, good chat. Shame about all the technical issues at the start, but hopefully we can edit those to an acceptable level.
Yeah. No worries, man. Thanks for having me.
Man. If I ever come over to Perth, which I don't do very often, or if you're ever over this way, then come and let me know and we'll catch up.
Absolutely. Thanks, mate.
Cool, dude. All right. Take care. I think we have to stay on the line, but I'll end the recording now. Cheers, guys.
See you guys.